The event was inspired by a cinema that I discovered had been at the end of my road. So that's Casland Road on the corner of Casland and Wells Street. And it was quite an extraordinary discovery. I just saw a picture of it, and there's no trace that it was ever there. And this made me start to think about these places in the city that had once had this big influence, and these places that people had visited and just did not exist anymore. So that inspired the day. We've got a whole range of different people speaking about loads of interesting things that are connected to this idea of the influence of cinema, the transitory nature of the city, cinephilia, all sorts of different subjects. There is a schedule for the day, but we had a little bit of a printing issue, so there might not be one each. But do ask us if you want to see one, and we'll try and cobble one together. So anyway, we'll get started. And the first thing, it's going to be a mixture of talks and screenings today, and performances. And the first screening is my film. It's called Ghost Cinema. It's an essay film, and I will hand you over to my film. My name's Pamela.
The South Hackney Picture Palace, built by Francis Bliss and Thomas Holden, opened in 1913 on the corner of Casland Road and Wells Street. At a time when, as Alistair O'Neill notes, the pace of invention accelerated the speeding of modern life in London, these first purpose-built cinemas were exotic and enticing, offering comfort and luxury in marked contrast to the hastily converted shops, halls and railway arches of the early hundreds, with their bijou proportions and painted-over windows. In the only photograph I can find of South Hackney's Picture Palace, it appears to be a modest-sized building akin to an exotic circus tent or a small pavilion, its roof rising to a point topped by a flag and looped by bunting. Its jaunty looks are shared by other early cinemas, such as the Electric Palace in Harwich and the Coliseum in Stoke Newington. And here, with a spoiler alert, I will jump ahead because the South Hackney Picture Palace, or theatre, or simply the South, no longer exists. It was demolished in 1956 and is not remembered at all in accounts of historic Hackney or cinema history. Walter Benjamin believed that objects from the historic past should collide with others in the contemporary order to create new insights into the present and offer an understanding of what has gone before. With this in mind, I will meander through a story with a beginning, end and future. Cinema was initially called the Poor Man's Theatre, and the shop shows and very first cinemas were predominantly located in the poorer London boroughs. By 1913, the upper middle class population of South Hackney had begun to migrate to the more salubrious Stamford Hill, and overcrowding and bad housing became political issues in the mixed population of the borough. It was against this backdrop of social upheaval that the picture palaces and electric cinemas appeared, rapidly expanding into the upper working class and lower middle class boroughs such as Hackney. This process of bourgeoisification initiated a rush of investors keen to cash into this latest of pop entertainments. Alongside the South, 41 other cinemas opened in August 1913. In Great Britain, and by 1914 there were 474 cinemas in London alone, each showing continuous programmes to audiences of men, women and children. Cinemas were cheap to visit, and despite the suspicion that they encourage immorality, with staff reportedly turning a blind eye to sexual behaviour going on in the darkness of the auditorium, they were generally safe spaces for the family to gather and escape the often harsh conditions at home. Tickets at the South cost as little as twopence, with children half price. The proprietor of a Limehouse cinema recorded seeing a woman peeling potatoes in his auditorium, the peel mingling with the nutshells and orange peel that littered the floor. Before and alongside early cinema, the dominating popular entertainment was the music hall, which had a rowdy, interactive, mostly male audience. The proclaimed queen of the halls, Marie Lloyd, was born in Hoxton in 1870 and spent time making babies' boots and curling feathers for hats before deciding upon a career on the stage. Aged 16, she appeared at the Seabright Music Hall off the Hackney Road, which bore the inscription, "Let the evening's enjoyment bear the morning's reflection," above the stage. After her successful stint at the Seabright, Marie Lloyd took her double entendre-infused songs to the West End, where she accompanied her singing with skirt dancing. This involved manipulating long layered skirts to create a motion of flowing fabric, often in a darkened theatre with coloured light projections highlighting the patterns of the skirt. Alongside the acts on the music hall bills of the early hundreds were short projected films, the starting burble of cinema. Catching sight of the shimmering translucence of projected images would have been tantamount to seeing ghosts. By 1910, the Seabright Music Hall was the Seabright Picture Palace, and in 1912, a year before he was involved in the opening of the South, Francis Bliss was its listed licensee. Between the music hall and the cinema, another popular entertainment took hold: roller skating. In 1909, spectators rushed to build rinks to take advantage of what seemed to be a watertight moneymaker. In March 1909, rinking companies were being registered at the rate of one a day, with major venues attracting 5,000 at weekends. By 1910, the craze was over, causing the bankruptcy of hundreds of rinking companies and leaving disused sites and building shells, venues available to be leased to investors in the next boom, cinema. The premier skating rink opened in Lower Clapton Road in December 1909. Less than a year later, plans to turn the rink into a cinema were already being discussed, and the Rink Cinema opened in 1911. On the 23rd of August 1913, the Hackney Gazette congratulated the South for the excellence of its programme, notably the 6-minute comedy Hide and Seek, starring Mabel Normand, which was shown alongside 7 other films. Normand was a sensation of early cinema, a tiny, curvaceous woman with huge eyes who liked to eat ice cream for breakfast, and in the words of Janine Bassinger, could ride a horse, drive a car, fall on her butt, clamber over a rooftop, and still look like $1 million. The first 15 years of the 20th century, writes Peter Bailey, saw a glamorisation of women in the capital. In Hackney in 1913, the Sunday monkey parade on Mare Street was where, as historian David Mander describes, the young would show off their fine clothes, the girls in showy costumes of petunia, violet and sky blue hues. This explosion of showing off was surely inspired by the cinema, where colour-enhanced newsreels documenting the latest Paris fashions could be seen alongside the war reports, melodramas and comedies. In 1913, a journalist who saw a filmed fashion show of Paul Poiret's work described the models drifting across the screen as goddesses from a machine. One of the most famous designers of the era was Lucille, also known as Lady Duff Gordon. Whose glamorous outfits were worn by actresses and aristocrats. Cecil Beaton described her clothes, which were sheer and body-hugging, as being made of delicately sprinkled soft materials with bead or sequin embroidery, which created an indefinable shimmer, as if illuminated by electric light, turning women into flickering images. Lucille recruited working-class girls as her models, exotically renaming them Camilla and Hebe, emphasising the theatricality and transformative nature of dressing up. For the young women that visited the picture palaces, dress became a form of subterfuge, a way to break away from rigid restrictions of class and status. And it is no wonder that George Bernard Shaw's stage version of the Pygmalion myth, which premiered in 1914, became his biggest hit and has been reworked over and over again. Before the start of World War I, many American actors and directors came over to the UK to ply their trade, making films for companies such as London Film Productions. These included actress Edna Flugrath, one of three Silent Star sisters, and her future husband Harold Shaw. By 1914, the South boasted the finest threepence seats in London, from which you could watch the feature-length films of 4 or more reels that were increasingly replacing the 10-minute one-reelers. These included The Blood Ruby, Saints and Sinners, and the great British production Bootle's Baby, in which Flugrath, directed by Shaw, plants her secret baby with the wrong man, but ends up marrying him anyway. These films, along with much silent film output and the stars that appeared in them, are now lost and all but forgotten. Frampton Park, the area to the north of Wells Street, was named for the Frampton family, who owned a good chunk of Hackney at a period when it was mainly fields. Some of the family are buried in St Thomas's burial ground on Wells Street. Their tomb is one of the few still remaining in what is a scrubby bit of green, best known as the place where 14-year-old Shaquille Smith was stabbed and killed as he sat with friends one evening in 2008. In 1913, Wells Street had shops and pubs on both sides of the street, including the Green Dragon, which traded from 1732 until 1956, and is visible in my only remaining image of the South. Early cinemas, unless they were rebuilt or enlarged, were often destined to become flea pits. Their cramped facilities and outmoded looks could not compete with the new cinemas of the 1920s and 1930s, which also took the best new films away from them. The South managed to weather the storm of World War I and was taken over by Charles Spencer in 1925, who did some improvements, including adding a band pit. However, by December 1930, the cinema is not listed at all in the weekly Kinema Guide, and the trail goes cold, until it was taken over by the Odeon Group, emerging in 1937 after alterations by the Dalston-born architect George Coles. This new incarnation came at a time when cinema-going was at a golden age of Hollywood peak. In 1939, 2 days after Britain declared war on Germany, a government order closed all places of public entertainment, including the country's 4,300 cinemas. George Bernard Shaw, in a letter to the Times, described this as a masterstroke of unimaginative stupidity, and the unpopular order was soon revoked, and the cinema reopened. The population, it seems, was happy to trade the danger from bombs for a few hours of escapist entertainment. One of the few traces of the South is in advertisements in the Hackney Gazette. In 1913, actors' names were not included on publicity material, but by 1941, the cinema revolved around stars, with a whole industry built up to provide information to an audience hungry to know more about the people that they emulated and dreamed of. The films shown at the South in early 1941 made it apparent that it was not a prestige theatre. They didn't show the films that have lasted and are still talked about. Instead, the headliners tended to be films like I Want a Divorce, starring Joan Blondell, a slap-happy comedy of young love, or The Man I Married, where Joan Bennett, according to New York Times reviewer Bosley Crowther, does little more than model dresses and express incredulity, or Too Many Girls, the silly film, which is most notable as the one where Lucille Ball first meets Desi Arnaz. These films may have been second-rate, but the stars still looked great, beautifully dressed and made up. This was reflected in fan magazines such as Picture Goer, which, despite wartime austerity, maintained full-colour covers featuring mainly female Hollywood stars. The government had decided that appearance was important and thus kept makeup off the ration. The Picture Goer covers tended to be head and shoulders with a focus on hair and makeup, because in wartime, as Angus Calder has observed, beneath the neck, fashion was almost impossible. Sociologist Pearl Jeffcott, in a study of working-class women who came of age in the mid-1940s, noticed that the appearance of stars was key to their interest in films. She noted, "The amazing extent to which the minutiae of the clothes and the hair arrangement of an American actress may affect the spending habits of a girl in a tenement in London." This, Jeffcott made clear, was not just idle interest, but was driven by their belief that a poor girl's appearance is her main stock in trade, and one of the few areas of life over which working class girls had control and could be self-determining. The film, advertised at the South in the Hackney Gazette of 18th of April 1941, was Quiet Wedding, a buttoned-up British affair co-written by Terence Rattigan and starring the charming brunette Margaret Lockwood. The New York Times, with interventionism in mind, gushed that Quiet Wedding was a glowing tribute to the resolute calm of the British, with, they note, its production being halted 5 times by Nazi bombs falling in the studio. This 18th of April listing is, however, a ghastly projection of a performance that never was, because by this date the cinema had already closed. On the 16th of April 1941, at the height of the Blitz, a bomb exploded in Frampton Park. The South was damaged, and although the building survived, it would never show another film. The Hackney Gazette does not report the South's closure. Bomb damage reports were bad for wartime morale. The only evidence of the cinema's demise is the "Showing at Your Odeon" advertisement published on the 21st of April, which only lists the Hackney Road Odeon. The South is never mentioned again. So the unfortunate South was never able to take advantage of the cinema boom of the remaining war years, and instead became a furniture store, before eventually being demolished in 1956 to make way for a sprawling Hackney Council housing project, the Frampton Park Estate. The longevity of cinema, over 100 years and counting, has created its own folklore, and many of the cinemas from the boom years of the 20th century have become ghostly presences with little left to prove that they were once much visited beacons of modernity. Over 70 cinemas have opened and closed in Hackney since 1909. By the end of the 1980s, thwarted by home video and a downturn in economic fortune, the Rio in Dalston was the last Hackney cinema standing. But the sweeping gentrification, so hated by East London's creative communities, has had one positive outcome. The once ubiquitous cinemas have started to return, catering to a new wave of young incomers hungry for shared experiences in an environment oversaturated with personal entertainments. The new cinemas, such as the multi-screen Hackney Picture House, converted from the old library, and multi-purpose, the Institute of Light, a railway arch by London Fields, are very welcome. They have not, however, completely exorcised the haunting presence of the ghost cinemas of the borough, such as the Regal on Mare Street, which opened in 1936 with an auditorium decorated in pink plastic paint with a touch of mauve, green and biscuit colour, with seating of light oak upholstered in orange with green armrests. In 1982, the Regal, by then called the Mayfair, closed, becoming a snooker hall for a while before being demolished and replaced by an Iceland supermarket in 2000, an ignoble fate for a once so glamorous building. It is the sheer unremarkableness of the South that makes me want to know more about it, but its lack of physical presence in an unfashionable site hinders any chance of its resurrection. The city, after all, has little time for sentimentality. It's an ever-moving organism, and there is change and evolve to cater for the needs of their inhabitants. But some ghosts do come back to life. The Castle Cinema in Brooksby's Walk, E9, first opened as the Castle Electric in 1913 and shut its doors in 1958. Since then it's been a bingo hall, a shoe factory and a snooker club. Today the building is carved in two. Downstairs is an upmarket spa, supermarket and burger bar. Upstairs, renovated over the last 12 months by 2 young entrepreneurs, is the newly opened Aubergine and Gold 80-seater Castle Cinema. In February 2017, the first film screened for an audience at the castle since 1958 was, appropriately enough, La La Land, a film about cinema's dreamland for a dream-like cinema resurrection.
Nice to get that out of the way. So, the plan is to carry on and have a couple more people presenting, and then we can have some questions if there are any. So I'm going to move swiftly on and introduce Lucy Ayres. Lucy Ayres is a painter, and she studied at the Slade School of Art in the mid-1980s. And was a student in the inaugural year of the Turp Studio postgrad painting programme. Her works are mainly on paint, wide variation in scale, and recent projects have also included mural, drawing and animation. And she was one of the artists that was in our Speedway show, which is just finished. And I'm going to pass you over to Lucy, who's going to talk first and then show animation. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the ideas behind the animation that will be screened afterwards. I was intrigued that the South Hackney Picture Palace added a band pit in 1925, which would have been short-lived, made redundant by about 1930 when sound was incorporated into film. As Kathy explained, the history is a little bit different, but it anyway would have been by the 1930s. Sound came in and so band pits went out. It seemed fitting for my first animation that includes sound to be focused on musicians who would have played around in sync with silent movies. That moment before the film starts, when the band tunes up, is a peripheral moment outside the real programme. And that's the moment that I've chosen to focus on. At best, it's an outtake. Tuning itself is a sophisticated and subtle art. It can be read as a metaphor for harmony or discord. And in this instance, the players are attempting to harmonise. Whilst the intention is harmony, the actual sound of tuning, as the soundtrack portrays, is a discordant one. Silence is also important. Silence provides the starting point, which sound then relates to. It also provides the rests and punctuation that phrasing needs. And without phrasing, it's difficult sometimes to create meaning. I think another point about the audio, the sound in the animation is that it doesn't have any phrasing. The silence at the beginning of a performance or screening is one of anticipation. And in the case of addressing dissonance, which is the name of my animation, this moment of silence comes at the end of the animation, which brings the image back to a still drawing. And I think something I feel about the animations I've been making is that in a way they are more animated drawings rather than drawn animation, although I've been using very old fashioned technology of drawing in order to make them. So I'm going to run through a few slides that point towards some of the ideas and images that were sort of in the back of my mind whilst I was making this piece. And the first image is of a medieval image of musicians playing in harmony, and it's quite an unusual one in that it shows a Muslim and a Christian playing a duet, and it comes from a very early book of Galatian songs that were supposedly written by King Alfonso X of Castile. But for me, the interesting thing about the drawing is that it this drawing would have been, not all painting would have been made around the time of the Crusades, and so but his court was a very cosmopolitan and open one. There were Jewish and Muslim and Christian scholars worked within the court, and so an early image trying to show harmony at a time when there was a lot of discord. And have the next slide. Painting, by its sort of nature, is silent and still, and I think that one of the things that with my drawing is that I try to often evoke movement, but I'm interested in images that evoke sound, and I've chosen two images, one of by Jan Steen, so a Dutch genre painting, which is quite sort of chaotic and bawdy, but I think the sound or the feeling from it is one that of sort of merriment. It's called The Merry Family, and evokes quite a sort of party, happy environment. And the next one, on the other hand, is The Enraged Musician by Hogarth. And for me, this image is a sort of visual equivalent of that idea of scratching your fingernails down the blackboard. It's sort of very antagonistic. Here, he is, there's a whetstone where he's grinding a cleaver, but yeah, full of really, I think, quite horrible noise. Another idea I find interesting is the way that people are maybe expected to behave in certain cultural spaces, and this is a lithograph by Daumier, which will have been a satirical image with a member of the, well, most of the orchestra look as if they're about to fall asleep, but and one of them is yawning loudly. But again, during a tragedy, so I suppose the stage was probably meant to keep people a little more attentive than they're managing to do with, at least with the orchestra. But I suppose there's sort of roles of how people behave in certain places. This is by Degas, and I think the thing here that I wanted to look at was the sort of divisions of spaces compositionally, where similarly to the Daumier print that we looked at before, you've got the stage at the top, and then musicians, and then this bottom bit of the painting here is the audience. So we are in the audience. That's where we've been put to look at this. And although this is much more of a group portrait, a lot of the musicians were meant to be friends of Degas. So there isn't that sort of satirical aspect. I think the way that it's cropped and the way that different groups of people are put in different places is interesting. And so this is the drawing that my animation is very loosely based on. And Sickert, also Sickert, drew repeatedly in music halls, and particularly his sort of favourite music hall was the Old Bedford, and he painted in that in the late 19th century, and then he then went to France and then came back, and it had been the inside of the Old Bedford, it had been sort of relaunched as the New Bedford, and was even more sort of lush and beautiful inside. But I'm going back again to the sort of divisions of space where he's looking down from a box, and he's observing both the audience and the band pit, or the orchestra pit then. And this would have been for a music hall as opposed to a cinema, but I think with these few images that I knew of Sickards that looked down into that orchestra pit that made me think of the band pit and want to make something about that. He repeatedly went into the same seat and then drew again and again the same views, the same compositions, and he also repeated things through working in different media. And I think this with the seriality that he also made these very quick observations of people's gestures and the sort of characters that came. And yeah, so this is a print, the previous one's a drawing in the next slide, and onto a painting. But I draw from memory, and there's that repetition of watching someone again and again. I think it's something that I feel a closeness with Sickert over. And then the final image is of this is the New Bedford in 1959, when it was already in disarray and unused, and but in part the decline of the music hall was due to the sort of rise of cinema, and that's. Who's going to be talking to us in her talk, Dreaming of Home, Domestic Transformations in Post-War British Cinema. Holly completed a PhD on domestic life in British 1940s feature films at Queen Mary, University of London in 2015. She's currently researching wartime information films at the School of Advanced Studies and working on a book based on her thesis. I'll hand you over to Holly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathy. Okay, so today I'll be talking about escapist visions of home in post-war British cinema in the late 1940s. I apologise for my voice. It's really, really croaky, but hopefully it will survive. Tell me to speak up if it goes. So I'll be talking about post-war British cinema around 7 or 8 years after the South Hackney Picture Palace closed, and at a time when I was interested to find out that it became a furniture store, so there should be some overlaps and links between cinema and home. And so I'll particularly be looking at the way on-screen homes encouraged audiences to remember the pre-war years of peace, allowing them to dream of their future domestic lives in the post-war years. Okay, so as early as 1943, the British film industry's trade press claimed that audiences increasingly wanted entertaining films that would provide a feeling of escape from their war-torn conditions. Historian Susan Cooper describes how hope was burgeoning and that escape, escape, escape was the national urge. In 1947, Conservative MP Beverly Baxter noted that in parts of Lancashire where life is very grim, one sees the local cinema palace and its perhaps slight vulgarity, but there it is, a magic door at which people can leave the hardships of reality and for 2 or 3 hours be carried away on the wings of song or fantasy. Slide, please. In this period in the late 1940s, glamorous homes on screen offered cinema audiences an escape from everyday life. These included the palatial hallways and extravagant ballrooms in the London townhouse in the Courtneys of Curzon Street in 1947, a marble hallway furnished with antiques and sprays of blossom in bloody massive vases all the way through this hallway. In Spring Park Lane, released a year later. A series of luxurious hotel rooms and domestic interiors like this one on the left on the bottom, with its dramatic draping, silk covers and chandelier in David Lean's drama The Passionate Friends from 1949. And an elegantly furnished country house in another romantic drama, The Glass Mountain, from 1948. In 1948, J.P. Mayer's sociological study of cinema-going highlighted that Hollywood films were far more popular than British ones, and these British films were marked by the glamorous escapist style, which had made Hollywood films so popular and also so culturally pervasive. At a time of continuing austerity, these glamorous visions of home embodied a growing consumer culture focused on the home, and represented the British film industry's attempt to compete with Hollywood escapism. So they offered British films as part of this sort of magic door experience of the cinema described by the Tory MP in 1947. However, in this talk, I'll be exploring how the luxurious dream homes in British films were also tempered by a sense of restraint and decorum, preventing any association with the vulgarity of Hollywood glamour. These films' transformative domestic landscape on screen was also characterised by links with the past, tradition and Englishness. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to show a brief clip from The Glass Mountain, which was a massive box office hit in 1948. It was such a big hit that it was re-released in Oh, sorry, I'm not quite ready. Sorry, it's not going to work. So it was a massive hit in 1948, so much so it was re-released in 1950 and 1953, and it focused on married couple Richard and Anne, who were played by popular British stars Michael Dennison and Dulcie Gray, personal favourites, but much forgotten. Richard, to give you a brief overview, Richard is a composer who writes a hit song, and he and Anne move from a cramped garret into an idyllic, luxuriously furnished country house. The film begins with them in the 30s, dreaming of his future success, and they spot their future house. It's empty, it's abandoned, covered in foliage, it's got an overgrown garden, and they break in and start dreaming of their ideal home. So this is the sequence.
Wherever you are, you owe your one step. I'll tell them all of that. Darling, look. Oh, this is the kind of house I've always dreamed of. I believe it's empty too. I need a job. Steady, that baby's up on that. Then we should have to go back on our personal job. you done any housebreaking?
Never. Not so dismal.
Empty houses are always like this. It sounds discourage the wrong sort of people. The ones with no imagination.
My imagination suggests a body on the landing. Lean off on furniture.
Then you get some more furniture.
Naturally.
This staircase needs ancestors.
Well then, there was a great Uncle Herbert, pillar of the church and a demon of cribbage. His wife Rosita put in flower paintings and worked sound plays that were considered rather daring in their day. And of course, great-great-uncle the Black Sheep. He made a not fortune guarding for both sides during the American Civil War.
You describe him so well, I can understand.
Just in the drawing room.
Sean has done too much stories. What would you like as musical?
That'd be wonderful. Got to be a grand piano.
Your next one should bring it for the start.
In that case, we'll have an ornamental bass line.
And there will the tea, a wing armchair by the
And
fire,
on the wall, that shiny Chippendale mirror.
and the beautiful toilet in my all of the open places series.
And we were friends for dinner even when the little penny had danced every other night. I enjoyed that.
Could be perfect.
Darling, you haven't lit your house yet. You know, we couldn't possibly.
Sorry? Of course I know. We're only again. Do the night game.
What's his name?
Sorry?
What's his name?
Michael Dennison. We'll come up again, don't worry. So in this sequence, next one, please. Yeah. In this sequence, Richard and Anne imagine the transformation of their ideal home around them. As elegant furnishings and decorations magically appear, the empty room is transformed into a music room. Once the room has been reimagined as their ideal home, the dream visions of their characters dance around the room in evening wear, and they are personally transformed into more glamorous versions of their characters. The scene evokes the fantasy versions of the home that were being promoted more widely in a burgeoning post-war consumer culture, offering the magical transformation of the everyday lives of consumers. Such dream homes appeared throughout the 1940s in popular home magazines such as Ideal Home and Modern Home, and a huge number of adverts for household technologies, decorations and furnishings, all as part of an aspirational culture surrounding domesticity focused on the optimistic return to new modern homes after the war years. In fact, in the same year, The Glass Mountain was released. Please. Its two stars, Michael Dennison and Dulcie Gray, featured in this advert for Airborne Armchairs. And the advert promotes the idea that with Airborne Armchairs, audiences could have the same attractive film-style lifestyle as Dennison and Gray. I'm not sure if you can read this, but the advert says, "The selection of an actor or an armchair depends upon personality, performance, finish. In the sphere of upholstery, Airborne is a natural for stardom. Versatile and adaptable, its sectional construction enables it to fulfill any role, from fireside chair to five-seater settee. Airborne plays the part in perfect character." It does spell their names wrong, but other than that, it's fine. This image of Dennison and Gray has been constructed a little bit dubiously to mimic the glamour of Hollywood stars and convey aspirational possibilities for transforming domestic life with new armchairs. However, the ideal home their characters dream of in The Glass Mountain is characterised by a very English traditional form of glamour. Their ideal home is tied up with a rural country house lifestyle, and with a strong sense of the past. The items that appear are portraits of family ancestors and antique furnishings including an old settee, a winged armchair and a grand piano. Likewise, off-screen, next one again please, Denison and Gray were often pictured in magazines and handbooks in their country cottage, as you can see here in Picture Goer magazine in 1949. They're shown both in glamorous evening wear, as they were seen in the Ed 1 advert and in the Glass Mountain. However, they're also shown drinking tea, chopping firewood and cheerily looking out of the window of their country cottage together. The article describes how, with its thatched roof, quaint latticed windows, fruit trees and lovely garden, the cottage looks really oldie-worldy. Here, Denison and Gray's glamorous film style lifestyle, unconvincingly open Hollywood, is restrained, made traditional and English, with the suggestion that their home wasn't a show place for entertaining guests and holding wild parties. Instead, and this is a quote, it is lived in by people who know how to make a home. And Dulcie describes how the couple like their evenings in together, sort of reading up on the behaviour and care of their favourite flowers. The dream sequence in the Glass Mountain and these depictions of Denison and Gray off-screen tapped into an image of the home which looked back to the popular interwar promotion of modern suburban homes. This was particularly popularised by the Daily Mail Ideal Home exhibition held annually at London's Olympia, which later became the Ideal Home Show which we know today. It had been hugely successful in the years before the war. Aimed at lower middle and middle class visitors, the exhibition promoted aspirational dream versions of the visitors' homes, emphasising the new consumerist possibilities for transforming the home with new furniture and technologies. As you can see in this very photo, scale reproductions of houses as part of a village of ideal homes allowed visitors to peruse spaces which served as utopian representations of their own homes. While promoting aspirational purchases, though, the exhibition also reinforced a sense of tradition, national identity and conservative stability. The exhibition motto was, "The foundations of the national glory are set in the homes of the people." The exhibition included displays celebrating the traditional English home, and the catalogue advertised antique furniture, lending a sense of middle-class restraint and an emphasis on the past to images of modern consumer possibility. Next one, please. After a short, that really is blurry, I'm sorry. After a short wartime hiatus, the exhibition was revived in 1947, when it's recorded that over 67,000 people attended on one Saturday. And you can sort of see in this illustration how it was promoted as this spectacular, immersive experience and an escape from the conditions of post-war austerity. The 1947 Ideal Home exhibition featured a gallery of British films, showcasing set designs from popular British films of the period, and this was followed by a number of other similar film displays in the late 1940s. In the display of British film sets in 1947, the escapist spaces in British home were made real as part of the consumer culture of the home, sort of connecting the intangible experience of cinema with the attainable realities of homemaking. For instance, the 1947 catalogue explains that the rainbow vision of Oberon's Palace, or the Cloud Castle in Spain, the misty croft, or the dark dank dungeon on the cinema screen, had first to be built and perfected as tangibly as your home is, thereby encouraging visitors to see connections between their homes and the magic spaces that they were seeing on the cinema screen. Next one, please. The post-war exhibitions particularly promoted Herbert Wilcox's massively popular London series of films, with set designs featured in the Gallery of British Films, and adverts like these ones for Courtney's of Curzon Street and Spring and Park Lane in the exhibition catalogues. Reviews of the London series often emphasised that they were purely escapist crowd pleasers. So Spring and Park Lane was the most successful film at the British box office in 1948, with an estimated audience of 20.5 million people in just 1 week. So it had actually a higher audience than Gone with the Wind had in 1939, so massively popular for a British audience. It's a comedy, you might just need to click, yeah. It's a comedy set in the upper class West End about this couple, an aristocrat posing as a butler, played by Michael Wilding, as you do, who falls in love with Judy, who's the niece of a diamond merchant, if I remember rightly. It was described in Sunday Pictorial as a honey of a light, polished, froth and bubble comedy, and exactly what thousands of fans have asked for. And in the Daily Express, another review suggested that Wilcox and Neagle, his wife and leading lady of the series, make films that are a million miles out of touch with reality. Their plots are daft. You know before the first credit titles fade that everything is going to come out nice and pink and happy in the end. However, in the context of the Ideal Home exhibition, these films were promoted with one eye on their escapist appeal and another on their immaculate interiors and tasteful decorations. If I've got time, I'll just show a brief clip from Spring in Park Lane, which shows Judy arriving for a ball at her uncle's very grand house and the beginnings of her romance with aristocrat/butler Richard. And the scene really highlights this sense of optimistic escapism, particularly in its depiction of the home, where the house in question is really constructed as this very spectacular space. Like, it's nothing that audiences would have known for themselves in the late 40s. So if you could play this very
Good evening, Perkins. I've just got to the drawing to see if everything's all right. What's the matter, Perkins? You all right?
Oh, yes, quite yes. I trust you are.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Miss.
standard staircase behaviour.
Good evening, Richard.
Good evening, Miss.
Have any of the guests arrived yet, Richard?
No, Miss, not yet. You look very beautiful, when I say so, Miss.
What was that?
I said it was a very influential evening, Miss.
Did you?
You were the married Borchester.
What did you say?
What did I say?
You said, are you going to marry Porchester?
Did I say that? Very impertinent of me.
Extremely impertinent.
Extremely impertinent. Are you?
Richard, will you please tell Perkins I'd like to see him in the dining room to discuss the dinner arrangements.
Very good, Miss.
Okay. So, to conclude, films like this really created a dreamy, a dreamy on-screen domestic landscape for cinema audiences in 1948. The setting of this completely extraordinary-looking home creates an immersive spectacle through the couple's movement across this massive space of the room and the glamorous appearance of the hall. Mirroring the domestic dream dance sequence in The Glass Mountain, this escapist depiction of home is later amplified, is later amplified as Richard dreams of Judy dancing her way, she sort of dances her way through her very luxuriously furnished flat in this sequence, and then he continues dreaming and they end up dancing on this moonlit terrace of the mansion. So the couple's dance in the moonlight is made to seem all the more magical through the use of slow motion, to exaggerate their movement, particularly with her dress flying through the air. And it was featured, this terrace scene was featured in the Ideal Home Exhibitions Gallery of British Films that year, which is what I want to finish on. So it was featured in that gallery in 1948, And this terrace sequence simultaneously represents the transformative magic of cinema and the possibility of domestic transformation for potential homeowners. Here then, popular British cinema was both fulfilling the contemporary need for escape in the late 1940s, engaging with consumer dreams and remembering interwar sort of images of home, as well as negotiating the transformative potential of film and home promoted in suburban culture beyond the cinema. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for both of your presentations. They were really great. Has anybody got anything that they'd like to ask?
Yeah, I just want to know, Lucy, in your animation of the audience on the Oscar, is the chaplain near the front in mustard, is he on his mobile? Is that why he's down like this, or is he sleeping?
Well, that goes back to this question of what audiences are meant to do and then not meant to be on a mobile. But no, I tend not to put anything that's quite as I tend to make things a little bit more timeless and not quite as specific. But he could be. There is no mobile visible.
It would have been interesting if there was, I guess, but it would be quite strange. Anybody got anything else they'd like to say? Oh, no, please.
Me again. Would you know, by any chance, can you still go to the BFI and look at films that they have?
Yeah,
You can
sure.
still do that, okay. So, would these two, Glass Mountain and Spring in Park Lane?
They're both available on DVD relatively recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ah.
So the London series was very rare for a long time. We've only put it on videotape, but yeah, they're both released.
All right.
Lovely new versions.
I think they would be good right now.
Yes,
please.
Yeah. You know the sort of montage of the effect of the floaty furniture?
Yeah.
That reminds me of that from The Ghost of Mrs. Muir, where he comes in through the window, he's a sea captain, and she's a bit lonely, but he's always sort of see-through. But he sort of kind of comes into the domestic space from the sea with his like ocean's jumper and stuff. And he's sort of rough and handsome. But was that technique of having somebody kind of something sort of floating in the domestic space? Was that like of the time?
I've seen it earlier in the 30s and stuff,
Right.
actually, where things start appearing and sort of levitating.
Yeah.
I think it's relatively rare in the 40s.
That one had quite elaborate
Yeah,
ripple
like
effects.
yeah. So no, I haven't seen it other than that one.
And does it die off? I mean, does it, you know, that sort of ghost presence thing, does that, because it seems quite, in those sort of films, it was quite common in a way.
Yeah, well, sort of. I haven't seen it much in the 50s. It's more sort of realist, and you don't get that sort of sense of magic about things appearing. But there's a really interesting information film actually from the post-war period where they start. And there are two characters, and they furnish a house in two different ways. And one's really flowery and full of lace curtains and things, and the other's very austere. And that uses the same sort of transformative animation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it was massively popular.
Thank you. Well, maybe we will, it's a good time to have a break. We've got some lunch in the back room that everybody's welcome to come and grab some of. Oh, sorry, Alex has got...
No, I just want to say, and we have a shop
Oh,
where it's we're selling books, very cheap books, some cover films, some cheap aprons and some cheap things which have been made in response to the talks and the films.
May I just add, actually, Alex has made some that's what I should have said. Especially in response to some of Holly's ideas. There was a series of aprons and also Margaret Lockwood's
Which you've all got in your-
which should be in your packs.
That's inspired by your film.
That was inspired. And we also have the galleries magazines round and about for you to look at.
And if anybody wants to go to the...
So, our first speaker who is also our first performer, is Alex Pearl, or as he likes to be called, I forgot what his name is, Alex the Magnificent. Alex the Greater House. So Alex Pearl makes video installations, machines, games, photographs, objects and books. Much of Pearl's practice nods towards the structures and images of science fiction. The idea of the artist, genius, or crackpot scientist always lurks in the background. He's based between Manchester Metropolitan University and FACT Liverpool, studying for a PhD that looks at new materialist takes. It's really complicated. On mechanical and from that's right. That's the word. So Alex is going to do a short introduction and then he's going to do some magic. Go for it.
Oh, right, okay. Hello. I'm only Alex the Great and Magnificent and I'm wearing this hat. So, Great and Magnificent, not great. So I'm going to do a 10-minute talk and then show you Pepper's Ghost. Hopefully. Might not work.
It will work.
It will work. So I'm going to attempt to demonstrate a Victorian illusion called Pepper's Ghost, which was invented by Mr. Dirks, but then perfected by Professor John Henry Pepper in 1863. So he didn't invent it, he just made it better. He was an engineer and teacher at what was it called? The Royal Polytechnic Institution, and he wrote 11 popular science books, including the popular Boys' Playbook of Science, which I've had a look at, it's really good. By 1863, so within a year of him making this illusion, it became a complete craze in Victorian England and was playing to packed audiences across the country. So a theatre would open just to show Pepper's Ghost. And hopefully we'll see why. Go to the first slide. As you'll see, as we go along, Pepper's Ghost illusion straddles the two worlds of science and the supernatural. And they're two worlds which have kind of never really been separate. Victorian magicians, of which these are two playbills here, kind of harnessed both worlds of science and the supernatural. So this guy on the right here, you can see sort of harnessing Eastern mysticism and the other to look into his crystal ball. And this guy, although he's got an object from a science lab where, as usual, he's making a woman disappear. He's assisted by little demons, these fellas here. These guys didn't usually actually appear on stage in the production, they tend to be more in the imagination. The Pepper's Ghost illusion also marks the beginning of the Victorian fascination with the supernatural, with the sort of craze for seances, spirit photography, ectoplasm photos, which are well worth looking at. They're basically women sitting down with bits of gauze sticking out their mouths, looking a bit uncomfortable. And sort of culminated in the 1890s with massive argument between Harry Houdini, who was trying to stop seances because he said they were tricking people, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the Sherlock Holmes guy, who loved the supernatural belief that all existed. It's kind of an odd way around for those two people. So throughout the 19th century, you get, as you move into the world of cinema, you get this sort of fascination between machinery and science and the spirituality and ghostliness and things like that. If we go to the next slide, please. Right, this is the only sort of engraving Pepper's Ghost. I'm sorry it's a bit of a de-raised image, but it shows you roughly how it works. Basically, you've got an actress down here, quite often as usual a woman, and you just, again, dressed in white because that makes it work better, and she's having a light projected on herself, and the audience is here. The light is refracted up into the glass here, and the audience see the ghost appear over here, where she scares the man. Now obviously we're not quite doing that today, because that would involve digging down to the next floor and having a huge thing, but we're doing a slightly smaller version, which you'll see in a minute. And you can actually do it at home with tiny little things. If we move to the next slide, I'll show you roughly what it looks like. Press play. So this is a film that I made a few years ago, just with a little sheet of glass and a toy Madonna and a torch and a red curtain, because that's like magic in it. So as you can see, as I move the torch more onto the thing, she appears and disappears. So you get this sort of ghostly image. Quite like what we saw in the earlier film of the dancer in the house. It's also kind of a proto-cinematic trick, because it, I think for the first time, transmits a live body from one place to another onto a screen for an audience. So it's one of the earliest sort of ideas of actually a transmission of a live person, a Hollywood superstar arriving in Hackney. So it's sort of an early version of that. If we move to the next one, now you can do all that on cut. It's used quite a lot in music industry at the moment. This guy on the right, I think that's right because I'm not very straightforward, is Tupac Shakur.
Oh, true.
And this guy on the right is Snoop Dogg. It's good, isn't it?
Yes, sorry.
And this is in 2012. And he performed live, Snoop Dogg performed live with Tupac Shakur, despite the fact that Tupac had been dead for 16 years. And basically, although they advertised it as being a hologram, they used Pepper's Ghost with a video projection, and the live actors interacted. And this has been used again and again with Frank Sinatra, and I think Michael Jackson's been.
Elvis?
Has Elvis appeared as well? Elvis has appeared as well. So this links back to the Victorian interest in technology creating a link between life and death. It's bringing the dead onto the stage, of the gone or the missing, into the living world. Again, I guess like cinema. Next slide, please. This is from a children's book, as you can see. It's not a new idea. This is an example of the Deus Ex Machina in action, which was a sort of theatrical trick, as you probably know from ancient Greek theatre, where a god was brought onto stage to help clear things up a bit. Usually the plotter got a bit tangled and the god came in. You'll be all right, off you go. But to do that, they actually used a machine. They actually used a crane by which an actor was lowered down onto the stage. And that's quite a mundane one. Some of these stages were like 3 or 4 times the height of this room. So these guys were lowered down, and they were made into gods by these machines. They were literally transported into gods by the machines. But it wasn't just the machines. It was the relationship to the machine, you, the audience, the play, and the whole thing acting as a sort of big uber machine, sort of producing this god. And this has been carried on with lots and lots. Next slide. That's Jesus. Which Rubens is a Jesus. The whole idea of Jesus becoming a god is intimately linked with the machinery of the cross and the cave and the rock, which bring him to godhood. So it's sort of another one. Yeah, carry on. And here's Houdini doing his Jesus bit, wrong way up. He's sort of using the machinery of the crane again. And Houdini went through these things again, where he was imprisoned or buried or locked up, and he was reborn using machinery of basic sorts to perform that task. And it's not all men at last, finally, a woman. Annie Taylor, the first person to survive going over the Niagara Falls in a barrel. Although she did send her cat over the day before. It survived. It survived. I guess she wouldn't have done it. But again, those ideas of machinic rebirth sort of linked through the machinery and the human working together. She was sort of strapped in, as you can see, as a guy going with leg weights. There was a guy who went over just after, I think, who tied his leg to an anvil inside the barrel, and they only found the anvil in his leg. Hers was a better method. She was, in typical American fashion, she was a school teacher who realised she'd run out of work and hadn't got any money, so she decided to do that to ensure her retirement. Anyway, so I'm not going to shout what she voted for.
What lead weight keeps it from going round?
The lead weight keeps it upright, I think, as it goes into the water.
It never looks like that.
And then you put it again.
But I think that's what it's
Otherwise it was going to the bottom.
Yeah, the barrel was pressurised with like a big bicycle pump, so I think that helped it.
Oh, it's getting buoyant.
Yeah. But I'm not investigating to go through how she survived that. All right, next and final slide. This is the original Great and Powerful. As you've probably recognised, this is the moment in The Wizard of Oz where Toto rips aside the curtain to reveal that the Wizard of Oz is a kind of a mechanical trickster rather than this big scary hologram sort of head that's been shouting at them. Zizek wrote about this quite recently, well, the last 20 years, I can't remember, and said we're still fascinated by the fact that the machinery can do all that. It doesn't matter that the illusion is broken for us. So it doesn't matter if it goes wrong. It's kind of good for me, because if this goes wrong now, you don't mind. Right, now the illusion is going to happen over there, so I need you fellas to turn around. If you're over towards that edge, you might want to ease this way a bit. Do your thing.
That's really scary. Is that Kathy? Where's Kathy? It's a ghost.
And luckily, it's a bit scary, you can get rid of it. Have live people in there interacting as well, so you can do a lot more with it, and you can also turn all of them into a gorilla, which is quite fun. I didn't know a gorilla, so.
So is she in there?
She's in there. Come forward. Come forward. Yeah. She's not a gorilla.
Thank you very much, Alex. So I'm going to hand you over to Lisa.
I'm really sadly not going to make a ghost appear now. Sorry. There's some pretty things to look at, so it'll be okay. So I'm going to talk about ghostly imprints, the persistence of dream ballets in memory. So the medium of film and the world of dreams are two inextricably linked entities, with the former giving a creative space for the latter to play out. It is a relationship made explicit in the term Hollywood Dream Factory, coined by anthropologist Hortense Powdermaker in 1950. The medium provides a way to give audiovisual shape to all manner of ideas and fantasies, a constructed space of ideological exploration. This underlying fantastical nature of the film space is summarized by V.F. Perkins. The fictionality of the world is usually most marked in the character's relationship to the off-screen zone, which is the space forward of them. Their unawareness of the apparatus through which their actions and images are relayed. Though the performers have to be aware of the camera's needs Their playing most often creates the camera's absence and therefore transforms the nature of the space in front of them. It is not that these characters are oblivious to the camera. There is no camera in their world. There is a projector in our world. The projector is real and present. The absent camera confirms the fictional status of the movie image and the integrity of the movie world. The world of film is a wholly different reality than our own, regardless of how similar it may feel. This disconnect imbues this space with an almost supernatural quality, one that is simultaneously real and unreal. Alison Landsberg observes, cinema is an institution which makes available images for mass consumption, has long been aware of its ability to generate experiences and to install memories of them. Memories which become experiences that film consumers both possess and feel possessed by. The language employed here is interesting, utilizing paranormal terms to describe the movie-going experience. And indeed, in viewing the world on screen as a fictional world that exists simultaneously separate and a part of our own, film becomes the very definition of otherworldly. It is a space we can see, but we can never enter. Something that can immerse us in flickering images and overwhelming sounds, but will never materialize for us in a completely physical way, remaining a cerebral experience. Even when we might experience some kind of tactile response to cinema, which I will touch on shortly, it remains a psychosomatic response, one of the brain and not of actual contact. The idea of fictional screen world becomes more complicated when we are allowed to delve into the inner minds of the characters, becoming privy to their thoughts and dreams. Dream sequences add an additional layer of fantasy to film, a ghost world within a ghost world. These sequences tend to leave an impression on the audience, flagged up as an aberration in this flickering fantasy world, and therefore commanding more of a viewer's attention. We watch for differences between this dream space and the diegetic reality of the film, for hidden clues to unlock the desires of the dreaming character, for abstract ideas which might add a new context to the problems of the film world. I would like to focus on a very specific type of dream sequence, the dream ballet. Dream ballets are a trope which enjoyed a relatively short period of exploration in the 1940s and 1950s, when a combination of the wealth of resources available under the Hollywood studio system and psychological theories seeping into pop culture created the opportunity for filmmakers to experiment with more fantastical sequences and allowed audiences to engage with more complex ideas than typically found in the musical genre. Just as a side note, there are dream ballets that don't star Gene Kelly, but it's a Saturday, it's pretty to look at, so that's what we're going with. So when talking to people about films such as Oklahoma and American in Paris, it's almost inevitable that their dream ballets will come up in the conversation, although that conversation tends to be along the lines of, why does that dream ballet even exist? It's so long and boring. So instead of focusing on why this sentiment is obviously erroneous, let's instead deconstruct the elements which make up these sequences, which might cause them to live on in our minds. I believe that the addition of music and dance to the traditional dream sequence creates a stronger impression on the viewer, causing these particular sequences to persist in our memories long after the other details of their filmic worlds have faded. Next slide. There is the aforementioned idea of the ghostly place that is the dream space. Dream ballets hover precariously within the limits of the definition of diegesis, not existing in the reality of the filmic world, but in the mind of a character that inhabits the filmic world. The dream ballet lingers between realms, an unreality existing in a world that is already unreal. This spotlights the dream, singling it out as something different from the rest of the film, and thus imbuing it with an importance when compared to the rest of the film. There is an idea that the psychic space of the dreamer's subconscious forms a direct link with the viewer's subconscious, that the unconscious mind recognizes traits of itself in another. We do not get to peer into the inner thoughts of others in the real world, though there exists a very human desire to do so. The chance to see the unknown, what is denied to us in reality through the medium of film and the dream sequences, is undeniably attractive. These sequences feed an unconscious desire for knowledge and possession of another. This diegetic limbo of the dream space is also a characteristic of the integrated musical. That is, musicals where songs are employed to advance the narrative instead of being used as simply modes of performance. So think of Grease versus Pitch Perfect. Grease is integrated, Pitch Perfect is not. Deborah Thomas interrogates the questionable diegesis of the songs in integrated musicals. While we accept that it is the norm in this filmic reality that characters will spontaneously burst into song, where is the musical accompaniment coming from? If there is no plausible source of this music on screen, is it merely playing in the character's head? If so, does that mean the song is heard a cappella by all the other people on screen? And if a group of people are singing, are they all hearing the same imaginary music? So Thomas notes that it is precisely this bracketing out of the numbers which is of interest. It is as if the characters are temporarily lifted out of the diegetic world and relocated in another space, whose logic obeys a mixture of diegetic and non-diegetic rules. So musical sequences naturally embody a diegetic purgatory, which perhaps grounds the dream ballet in a way, causing them to seem to be a natural extension of the spectacle inherent to the musical genre. The strangeness of this space of limbo is not too far detached from the diegetic straddling reality the viewer has already been privy to, causing these sequences to be less of a disruption than if a film like Casablanca or Gone with the Wind contained dream ballet. Although I'd like to see a Casablanca dream ballet. So next slide. It is the use of music and dance which sets these dream ballets apart from dream sequences found in other narrative mediums and contributes to their retentiveness, especially when looking at them through the lens of affection, an abstract concept concerning the biological hardwiring of emotions. Brian Masumi defines affect as a pre-personal intensity corresponding to the passage from one experiential state of the body to another and implying an augmentation in that body's capacity to act, with affection concerning each such state considered as an encounter between the affected body and a second affecting body. So in other words, the theory is concerned with the ability of external stimuli to trigger within us emotions on a biological level, which materialize in unconscious ways. And this is extended to the realm of film studies with Laura Marx's idea of a haptic cinema, one in which the eyes function as organs of touch, engaging with the sort of tactility of the images on screen. The bodily response, as opposed to a merely optical response that is incurred by these dream ballets, is enhanced by the affective nature of music and dance. A musical example of this theory of affection is relayed by neurologist Oliver Sacks, who was presented with an elderly patient who, after experiencing a hip fracture, lost all feeling in one of her legs for 3 years, leaving her unable to consciously move it. However, when music was playing, she would involuntarily tap the immobile foot along with the beat. So by employing a music therapy, Sacks was able to stimulate the patient's affects to the point of regaining use of her leg. As Jeremy Gilbert put it, music has physical effects which can be identified, described, and discussed, but which are not the same thing as having meanings. And any attempt to understand how music works in culture must be able to say something about these affects without trying to collect them into meanings. In a lot of cases, the pleasure that individuals derive from music has less to do with the communication of meaning and far more to do with the way that a particular piece of music moves them. The music in dream ballets, then, can become an external stimulus, unconsciously provoking biological reactions within us and generating emotions which do not necessarily stem from a narrative point. This idea of affect can also be brought into the dance component of dream ballets. Aaron Brannigan theorizes that the somatic energy of the dance can be transferred kinetically to the audience, manifesting in the viewer as unconscious swaying, toe tapping, and undefinable body tingles. Art then is quite literally imprinted into the muscles, infusing the body with an unseen force which remains, becoming a physical link to a psychological space. Muscle memory interacts with cerebral memory to allow these sequences to be highlighted upon the mention of the films, merging body and mind into a combined experience. Dance can also relate in ways that dialogue and lyrics cannot. Free from the limitations of language, the gestures that make up ballet convey abstractions which penetrate the subconscious with ease. The very nature of dance mimics dreams, utilizing a bodily language to present shapes and motions which are left up to the individual to parse out for meaning. And like real dreams, these dream ballets can haunt us after a viewing as we ponder the sometimes nonsensical symbols we are left with. And so all of these concepts, the ability to view another's psychological space, the triggering affects of music, the energy transfer of dance, and the otherworldly space of film dreams merge together in the dream ballets to create an indelible impression on the viewer. And yet this doesn't seem to be a satisfying conclusion, perhaps because I've only presented just a taste of these individual ideas, perhaps because they don't converge together as neatly as I might like to definitively prove the thesis I set forth, perhaps because all of these abstract theories remain just that, abstractions that are impossible to concretely pin down. But perhaps that's fitting for this particular topic at this particular event. So these unanswered questions of why certain film sequences persist in memory become yet another ghost lingering on in our minds.
Whether or not the subject is already dead, every photograph is this catastrophe. Philosophical concepts of the photograph have long been characterized by persistent ideas of the uncanny, unreal, and undead. Roland Barthes makes the connection overtly. All those young photographers who are at work in the world, determined upon the capture of actuality, do not know that they are agents of death. He uses the word spectre to describe the haunting element present in the still photograph and lacking in cinema. Bazin compares the quality of photograph to a fingerprint, invoking the idea of a leftover trace or essence, an intellectually confusing quality of presence, the sense that the logical distinction between what is imaginary and what is real tends to disappear. Applying thoughts of the uncanny to an explanation of the power of the photograph, Laura Mulvey attributes these feelings of disquiet to the photograph's mechanical, chemical, and indifferent nature. It is no wonder, then, that the insertion of what Christian Metz refers to as merely a silent rectangle of paper is utilized to eerie effect in the horror and thriller genres of cinema.
I was just looking at the picture. Looks so much like you.
When the camera looks at a photograph, that photograph, or at least the meaning within it, is about to change before our eyes. What was previously a physical object becomes instead one of a range of horrifying psychological experiences. The return of the dead, the uncovering of a secret long repressed, evidence of the impossible, confusion of time and space, an omen of bad fortune, a terrible obsession, an intense yearning for the past. Rudolf Arnheim employed the term uncannily petrified to describe the dizzying sensation of seeing a still photograph in the middle of a moving frame.
Well, it's hard to read. I mean, it's like if you get too close to the screen, all you can see is a bunch of little dots. You don't see the big picture until you stand back.
A sense of motion is attached to the photograph, even if that sense can only be identified in its absence. What outside the film would be the expected experience of viewing a still image, within the film becomes something that has gone wrong. In its use of the word uncanny, this description evokes the idea of something concealed, which is there whether we want it to exist or not.
Perhaps they're ghosts.
The anxiety we feel as we stare at the photograph is caused by the knowledge that we may see something unpleasant, something we'd rather not see, but must. In Antonioni's blow-up, the still image is a catalyst for a change of mood and even genre, as the film switches from a superficial portrait of swinging London and the empty, if glamorous, world of a fashion photographer to a murder mystery. The central incident, around 56 minutes in, features the lead character, Thomas, discovering that he has accidentally photographed what appears to him to be a moment before a murder. Having been photographed in the park with a lover by Thomas, the girl, Jane, obviously anxious, at times hysterical, demands the role of film.
Stop it! Stop it! Give me those pictures. You can't photograph people like that.
Thomas develops the negatives and searches in the pictures for something bad, blowing up the images again and again and again. The camera shows us the images in the order Thomas has arranged them, panning or cutting to close-ups to emphasize crucial details. The couple in a romantic moment. The girl turns her head. We see the man in the trees. His gun. The girl sees the photographer. The couple break apart, the expressions of both registering concern. The woman is running towards the camera, her hand outstretched to hide her face. Behind her, the park is now empty. Her lover has gone. The girl stands, her back to the camera, next to a clump of trees. The girl is gone. A story told in stills, like Chris Marquez's influential short film La Jetée, released just 4 years earlier. Perhaps Antonioni had seen it and become convinced of the disconcerting power of the still photograph. At one point, Thomas places 2 photographs next to each other, one of Jane and the other of the cluster of trees in her eyeline, in order to gauge what it was she was seeing. We know that the photograph is not Jane, it's not alive, it cannot see. Regardless, the effect of one photograph looking at another is convincing and unsettling, causing a moment of intellectual uncertainty. Thomas is getting the photographs to enact a sort of macabre subjectivity. We have seen this scene before. We were with Thomas as he shot those pictures. We watched the lovers. Now we're seeing the same images again, but something is different. The familiar has gone awry. Not only are the lovers frozen, but something previously unnoticed has been revealed. There's a feeling of presence within this flat, serene surface.
I want you to see the corpse. We've got to get a shot of it,
Thomas says later, as he tries to convince his agent to come with him to see the body. The suggestion that the photograph alone cannot be trusted is another way of ascribing doubt to the process in general.
None of this lot. I've got something fab for the end, in a park. I only took them this morning, I'll get them later on today. It's very peaceful, very still.
Ideas of concealment or intellectual second-guessing echo in the ambiguous plotline and relationships in the film, as well as Jane's avoidance of explanations, her long silences, and the false telephone number she gives to Thomas. Then there's that moment where he says to Verushka,
I thought you were supposed to be in Paris.
I am in Paris.
The association between photography and death can be read not just in the obvious plotline of a murder and a dead body, but the soulless nature of Thomas's profession, the mod society he inhabits, and his own unpleasant, alienated personality.
You armed out. Right.
Writer David Campany actually notes that most films about photographers follow a particular tradition of presenting them as dysfunctional misfits, immersed in, yet out of kilter with the worlds they inhabit.
Terrible.
Blow Up is a film that exists in the space between modernity and post-modernity. Its defining themes of the fast-paced, cold and confusing city and the power of the photograph are both phenomena born in an era of change and industrialization. Like the city, the mechanical process of photography is indifferent, delivering psychological shocks unsympathetically, inescapably, harking back to the impression of fate or destiny that haunts the writings of Barthes, Bazin, Mulvey and other philosophers. Antonioni's technique of filling our vision with still image as we follow Thomas's train of thought only highlights this inevitable horror of the image.
Can I have the photographs?
The unnerving scenes where we look at the photographs are mirrored by several other strange moments of stillness. The models poised and waiting to be shot. The imaginary tennis game, where spectators in mime costumes stand and stare at Thomas, waiting for him to throw their non-existent ball back. The rock concert where no one is dancing. Fun fact, that band is the Yardbirds. Sound, in fact, is the magic ingredient in this set of scenes. David Campany describes the photographs as mute, exploring the ways that, without a voice of its own, a photograph is given context by its surroundings. A photograph is useful not because it speaks or says 1,000 words, rather its silence makes it useful. In Blow Up, all sound is diegetic, with the exception of the opening credits and 2 significant occasions. The sequence where Thomas discovers the murder in the photographs features a mixture of diegetic sound, silence, which isn't really silence at all, and extra diegetic sound. Thomas's world contains the noise that Thomas makes. The whir of his enlarger, the running water in his dark room, his wine as it hits the glass, his record on his record player, his footsteps. Between these sounds there is silence, or in fact not quite silence. Since Blow Up was filmed in 1966, even absence of noise can still be heard as barely noticeable tape hiss. The world of the photograph is initially silent, appropriately because it will not tell him what he wants to know. As the secret is revealed, tape hiss is subtly overlaid with another similar noise, something like a breeze, becoming stronger, the closer we get to the horrifying truth. The sound does not belong to the photograph, though it is familiar. It is the sound we heard earlier in the park. Later on, when Thomas discovers the real dead body, the sound is back, but its uncanny effect is gone. The sound is expected. The camera again rests on a motionless face, this time that of a dead person as opposed to one petrified by a camera. Somehow, though the bad thing in this scene is all the more real, the uncanniness is lost. There is no confusion. Here is a dead body. It will not move again. The ambiguity suggested by the photographs have disappeared, and with them the horror has dissipated. There is only one other moment of extra diegetic sound. It occurs right at the end of the film. A group of mime artists are playing a pretend game of tennis in the park where the murder occurred. As Thomas throws their imaginary ball back into the court, the camera remains on him, as the real sound of a tennis ball can be heard being knocked back and forth. This effect undermines the reliability of Thomas, and by extension his profession, photography as a whole, as a sensual witness.
Who lives and works in Hackney. Her work deals with layers and fragments of narrative from many sources and times, whose memories penetrate. I can't read my red. I've got red text. That's one actually. That's fine. That'll do. That'll do. Here's Catherine. Hi. So, me to make a film in response to the picture house that she already spoke about in her film, the South Hackney Picture House. And there's very little there's very little to show of it. There's just a still image, which we saw in Catherine's film, and then there's the actual location of the estate, which is very near to my house. And then that's all there is really. So with these three elements, I had to sort of work in a different way and kind of collage. Sorry, we have a slight hold up in showing the film.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So with these two, I'm going to be rewinding now. With these three elements, the location of the cinema and the still photograph, I had to try and make a film. So I went to the estate and I found, very interestingly, as I walked into it, there was a tunnel, and it was exactly. One of the facts that I had about the picture house was that, strangely, for a cinema, the screen was at the front of the building, which isn't how it is now. When you go in, you walk down, and there's. So when I went to the estate and I walked through this tunnel, it seemed that the little tunnel, the little oblong at the end of the tunnel, was where the screen was. So that was like the ghost of the screen was still in this quite unlovely estate, which while I was there, actually, people who were around, it was actually quite a nice place. People were very friendly, and while I was filming there, people asked me what I was doing, and so it was actually going there made me a little bit more friendly to it than when I walked past it and found it just quite a sort of unlovely modern estate on the site of something which was obviously a kind of wonderful place of sort of dreams and fantasy. So in actual fact, I became a bit more fond of the estate. So one of the effects that I use in my film is putting it into negative, which is a kind of nod towards Jean Cocteau's Orpheus, where when they go into the land of the dead, it's all in negative. So I wanted to try and make us think of the present day as also a place which was passing, that our own day is quite short, and that the people who are there now, who in my film, are sort of, they're the ghosts of today, and they'll be ghosts in the end. So I also used an effect where I filmed some of the films that were made and shown during the period that the cinema was open, but I allowed myself some artistic license because I couldn't be sure which films were actually shown, because there's not that much information. So I gave myself a bit of leeway on that. So I filmed some fragments of films which I've montaged over the top of actual filming of the present day estate to try and pursue this kind of romantic impulse of mine to think that stories and fragments of narrative and exotic ideas and dreams are still floating around in the air there or in the soil of the estate. So I think I was kind of mirroring the fact that the cinema was a place where people had romantic escapism from their everyday lives. So hopefully that will come across.
Lost in my dreams, I'm always tossed around and lost in my dreams. They never make any sense, or when they commence, you drift away from me. Through all my dreams, all I can do is look for you in my dreams. But you can never be found, you'll never run the way you used to. I'm always tossed around and lost in my dreams. Someday our paths may be crossed, and I'll never be lost in my dreams. Lost in my dreams, I'm always tossed around and lost in my dreams. They never make any sense, but when they come in.
I could invite Catherine and Lisa and Alex up to the front to answer any questions you might Yes, so has anybody got anything they'd like to ask our latest three kids? I'm going to put the lights on while you're thinking. Oh, there we are. You can see them now. Tim?
Can I ask one question which might make me seem quite dumb, but it seems quite important? There's a film, I think it must be a film theory word that's been used a lot. Diegetic.
Yes, I know. Me too.
I think I have a vague idea, but...
What do you think it is?
Well, I don't know, to do with sound that is actually reflective of what you're seeing.
Yes, diegetic is anything that exists in the reality of the film world.
Yeah.
Non-diegetic would be something that wouldn't exist in that reality. So usually non-diegetic sound you might hear on soundtracks in film that aren't coming from an actual source on screen in the reality of that film that doesn't have a source.
So like a radio playing in the film,
Yeah.
playing a song would be the diegetic sound.
Even if you couldn't see it, it would be...
Yeah.
It's
If you know-
reflective
if
of
you
what's
know it's
supposed
there,
to be
yes.
there. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a very film.
I have a question for Alex. Was there in the Pepper's trick, ghost trick, was there a kind of, is there a record of a kind of hype speech that would be given beforehand to get the audience interested? Because if it was such a spectacle to attend, I imagine they'd have to kind of pad the show with extra material.
Yeah, he wrote a book called, oh God, I can't remember exactly what it's called. Pepper wrote a book called something like The True Ghost or something, which explains some of the stuff that was done there. But I don't know actually. There's no written thing about what actually happened apart from him saying this is what he did. But he was also involved in the Royal Polytechnic lectures, which are like the lectures we have today, the science lectures. So I imagine it would be like that. Thanks.
Yes, Lucy.
Alex, I haven't seen, but I heard that in the French elections that have just been, that Mélenchon was projected as a hologram.
Yeah, it was a Pepper's Ghost rather than a hologram.
It was what?
It was a Pepper's Ghost rather than a hologram.
Oh, was it?
And he appeared in 8 locations at once.
Yes. It sounded like it sounded like it was by Star Wars.
Hardly any. There are holographic things, but they're expensive, so hardly anything you hear in the public realm being holographic is not. Pepper's Ghost or something like that.
Stephen.
I've got another Pepper's Ghost question, sorry. But I've heard rumours over the last couple of years that they're trying to develop water-vapor technology for laptops and computers to produce hologram.
Yeah.
Is that actually happening? And how is
Yeah, I
that
think
viable?
so. In Manchester they're setting up, or about to set up a sort of research department which is going to look at all different stuff, and that is one of the things. But already the Victorians were projecting onto smoke and stuff like that, so it's not new technology.
No.
It's, I imagine it's in stabilising the water.
Yeah.
Having the electronics.
Yes.
There is another trick you can do with an iPad, and you can find this on YouTube, where it's just clear plastic, and you just fold it into a sort of pyramid shape, pop it on top, and if you have the right image on your iPad, it will appear like a human.
Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, it looked like Carrie Fisher. You probably get Carrie Fisher.
Can I just ask you, Catherine, you were saying about, you were explaining to me about making your film at the beginning. I just wondered if you could tell us how you did the beginning bit. It's a painting, isn't it? The image of the...
Oh yes, I painted it on a sort of see-through like heavy paper, and then I put grease on it, and then I put it on the back of like a fruit box, and then I at night filmed a fire behind it, so so that it had a flickering effect like an old projection.
It does. It really. I did actually notice somebody turning around to see if there was a projector.
No, because I wanted to have the effect of that, because that's vanished as well. Projection. You know, we had the projector. You know, you could look up and see the projector, but now it's it's gone. But and sound was there as well, and so that's why it sometimes goes completely dark. But also I liked the bunting on top of the thing. That's one of what I liked in the picture was the bunting and the flag. So I wanted to make that come alive, and that was a good way of doing it.
I just wondered, wonderful film, honestly, really wonderful. I just wondered about the, and I might have missed it, you might have explained it at the beginning, the narration.
Okay, yeah, I forgot to mention that. I watched a film from every year the cinema was running, and I tried to take a piece of text, either intertitles from the silent film or a piece of dialogue, and then I used some of them but not all of them, because I wanted to sort of bring up all the different strands of stories and exotic locations, and kind of contrast that with the everyday reality of how it is now, the sort of ordinariness of today, is what I mean. Because it's sort of, that's one of the kind of pathos of it, is that all these things happened there and now there's nothing there at all to say that all that took place.
And I just wanted to ask Lisa, or say to Lisa, why wasn't there a clip from the pirate? Because I know a little tiny...
I have it with me. I think Harry is. It just didn't seem...
What film is that?
The pirate man with the hand in
yes,
sword.
Yeah, I wanted to know who that is.
Who is that?
Jim Kelly. Is he a pirate? Yeah.
It's an amazing film. We have tea now. Tea's served in the back room. We've got cakes and things, and so please take a break, and we will reconvene at 3:45. Is, let me find that place, Matthew Hall, whose talk is Cinephilia and Collectors at the Cinema Museum, Archives of the Everyday. Matthew is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Barbican Centre and Guildhall School of Music and Drama, where he's assembling and curating the Barbican Archive. He's interested in archives, esoterica, is that right?
Yeah.
Cultural history and everyday life. He's also an archive film and television programmer with forthcoming film seasons at the Whitechapel Gallery, BFI South Bank and the National Gallery.
Hello everyone. I'm here because earlier this year I did an exhibition at Birkbeck where I did a PhD years ago about, displaying some of the Cinema Museum's collections. So has anyone here been to the Cinema Museum? Yes. Yes. That's about 5 people. So that, I guess, the beginning of this explains what the Cinema Museum kind of is. It's a sort of mad jumble of stuff amassed by these 2 kind of brilliant men. But I'll all be explained. So the Cinema Museum was founded in 1986 by Ronald Grant and Martin Humphreys, housed in the Old Lambeth Workhouse, once the home of Charlie Chaplin and his mother during Chaplin's destitute childhood. The museum holds Britain's largest collection of cinema artefacts. These range from signage, seating, posters, 35mm film stock and architectural fittings, to a stills archive that holds over 1 million photographs. There are no certain facts about the Cinema Museum's collections, which might give you an idea of why it's an interesting museum. So if we go to the next slide, that's what it's like in science. That's not very high res. Is that high res? That's all right. And then if we skip to the next one, there are a few of these. Alongside its collections directly related to film culture, the museum is often the final destination for the personal archives and records assembled by amateur film enthusiasts. Stored in their library, the collections are tucked away from view on guided tours and go largely unnoticed by visitors and researchers. These became the subject of an exhibition I co-curated at Birkbeck, like I just said, entitled The Museum of Everyday Life, which presented a selection of these collections in order to discover the different ways people have engaged with the cinema and how they have attempted to formalise their cinema-going experiences. From noting the real names and hobbies of film stars, to giving their critical opinion on films, to collecting snippets of celluloid, to disregarding films entirely and chronicling the rise and fall of cinema theatres. Yeah, so this is quite a good kind of collage. That's Ronald in the centre, right? He's the founder of it. He started off as a projectionist in an Odeon or an Empire in Aberdeen in the 50s until it closed down. And then he found his former workplace abandoned a few weeks later with all of the original seats, carpets, everything, and he took it all. And that's how he took everything in a van. And basically that's what they do. So you can see the collections here. They've got a fantastic array of cinema ushers' uniforms, lenses, everything, a fantastic library.
I like the prices.
So it's an archive of cinemas, but it's an archive of cinema enthusiasts, and it's an archive of cinephiles. And the nature of their collections of people's collections is reproduced in the museum's curatorship. So kind of underpinning, the kind of curatorial approach is a kind of trailblazing compulsiveness and deliberate anti-professionalism on behalf of Ronald and Martin, which is basically that they spend their lives going to like house clearances of recently deceased film enthusiasts. Sometimes they knew them, sometimes they don't. And time is often of the essence, so Ronald has a cinema museum van, and they often have like 24 hours to go to an old, usually a guy's flat, and just take everything. And that's part of it. So this sort of acquisitions policy is to get everything they possibly can from, a closing down cinema or someone's collection, and then work out later what they need. So it's kind of like sifting for gold. And kind of what it means is that, along with every kind of rare 16mm print or fantastic sign or bit of carpet or, collection of projection, valves for a kind of projectionist machine, comes like people's collections of cookbooks or like, lamps, everyday objects, kind of, everything here, bags, clothes and stuff. And so what's kind of interesting is that like, last time I was there to have a meeting, there was a sort of stack of VHSs teetering over, like just sort of home video VHSs teetering over an old Moviola, which is a kind of flatbed cutting machine. And it just said Michael Winner's editing machine, like sellotape on it. And that was the editing machine that, Winner obviously made like Death Wish 3. Is that right? Death Wish 3, and all that crap. Anyway, so it's a kind of non-hierarchical space. And that's what's really interesting. And because it's also run by volunteers, it takes time for the collections to be moved and organised properly. So to the untrained eye, it's really hard to see what's important in the museum. And that's actually a sort of really innovative, quite progressive thing they've done purely through their compulsion. And it's quite an amazing museum space in that way. But, as I say, this was about the kind of the collections of collectors. So these are people who recorded their cinema experiences going to, what are now Go Cinemas. So what did we put in our exhibition? So if we go to the next slide. This was the collection of Graham Head. So you can, is that legible, the summary there?
Can you read it?
I'll read about the collection first. So this was 2,000 envelopes in the entire collection. It was a large metal index cabinet with 4 drawers, collected by Graham Head, who was a projectionist based in Brighton, who was well known within the British film collecting scene as being a key archivist of the Brighton pioneers. He would screen films in a custom-built cinema in his back garden of his mum's house, collecting a few frames from each of the films screened, practice common among projectionists. Some of his collecting practices included recording his day-to-day life on a tape recorder hung around his neck, the tapes of which are held at the Cinema Museum, although their exact whereabouts are unknown. These tapes include conversations with his mother and visits to his local pub and chemist, and Ronald constantly teases me about these tapes, because I've been trying to get hold of these Graham Hess tapes for a long time to involve as part of the exhibition. And he kind of knows where they are, and then he doesn't know where they are. But this is an interesting thing in terms of film archives, because this is exactly the habits that like the sort of powerful super curator sort of exhibits. So like a lot of people have said to me that the Cinema Museum, its great comparison would be like Langlois in the Cinematheque. This is exactly what Langlois used to do. He used to say, oh, I have this print. You must come in. And then you go and he goes, no, I can't remember where it is. So with archives come that sense of power. Yes, and so Graham Head used to cut snippets of film and then write very idiosyncratic summaries of the film on the envelope and then archive them. It was, you know. And should we go to the next one? Sarah recommends it. This was Peter Ewing, and this is kind of quite a touching collection which we featured in the exhibition. This is a series of scrapbooks and film diaries kept when Ewing was a schoolboy in London during the Second World War. Originating from a school exercise book entitled Regional Geographies, looking at South American landmasses, the work drifts into a film yearbook consisting of film ratings and reviews, interspersed with attractive collages of film stars. Peter Ewing is an articulate and fluent writer, commenting upon the film in a more critical vein than some of the more indexical collectors that we showed in the exhibition. In his adulthood, Ewing was well known by other film collectors and cinephiles, and he appears to have revisited these scrapbooks in the 1970s, annotating the film entries with notes about their TV broadcasts, suggesting that the scrapbooks remained an important marker for him throughout his life. And then in 1980, Ewing committed suicide in a reservoir, and that's all we know about him. Should we go to the next one? This was kind of the start of the exhibition. This was, this is the Vitkinson Star Archive. This is 36,000 index cards. And I actually have one in my bag if anyone wants to see one. Can you pass my bag? Kevin, my camera's assistant. Sorry, I should have prepared this actually. Oop. Give those back. The Cinema Museum don't know how to do. Obviously you steal things from Ronald because he steals things from other people, right? So this collection was made by Vic Kinston between he died in 2012. It's a freestanding, handmade wooden cabinet by the collector, made from bits of the Victorian wardrobe, and it contains self-designed, these index cards are self-designed by Vic, who made these, Vic Kinston. And Vic Kinston was a buyer and manager of grain stock for Staffordshire farmers, and he retired in 1987. The archive is a record of every actor that Kinston saw at the cinema in his lifetime, from 1940 to 2012. In 1944, Vic saw 238 of the 338 films shown at the Measham Empire, 70.41% of their year's programme. Unlike other collectors, Kinston operated outside of any established cinephile film memorabilia networks and was not aware of the activity of anyone else doing what he was doing. So he's a kind of isolated, I guess in some contexts it's a kind of outsider art, it's a kind of folk, there's a sort of folk expression here that in a kind of assemblage, indexable assemblage sense. The Star Collection is a deeply personal project where Kinston had his cards printed with a set of very particular criteria, including hobbies, eye colour, husbands or wives, and weight. There are 1,500 to 2,000 surplus blank index cards that are being passed around here. And the cabinet was donated by Kinson's by Vic's family in 2012. I just stumbled across this because I was bothering Ronald and Martin in the library, and I said, "What is this? This is amazing." And they were, "Oh, you don't want to look at that." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't really want to look at this." And it had been just sitting there. And the Cinema Museum is the only place that will take this kind of work, right? And so, what kind of museum takes this kind of work when there's not the actual historical value on the cars? Isn't necessarily, you know, it's not IMDb, it's not the BFI's catalogue, it's not, you know, what is the kind of museum, you know, what is that sense of cultural value here?
How many thousands?
36,000. And he did them right up until the 2000s. So there are entries for, you know, there's entries for Dirk Bogarde there. There's also, you know, Vin Diesel. So what we did is we deliberately, because we were working a lot with this kind of haphazard assemblage kind of world of Ronald and Martin, who are great, who are fantastic. And then what we did is we actually did something quite backwards. We put them in a, so if we go to the next slide, we put them in a very kind of like stripped back, minimalist gallery aesthetic, which is kind of conservative act. But when you work at the Cinema Museum, everything's slightly backwards. So something conservative actually helps show Ronald and Martin certain things that they collect. If you isolate them and put them in this kind of slightly sanitized gallery environment, then actually things, things aren't lost in the way they are when they're put amongst towering, VHS and Betamax and all the other stuff. So these are also smaller collections that I haven't mentioned, such as, that's an Odeon box in the middle, with a guy who made an index card collection of every single new Odeon throughout the 1950s with pictures, inscriptions. It was received, and this, we're working with Cinema Museums to turn this into a kind of travelling exhibition. So we're finding a venue in the States and possibly France, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, it remains to be seen. We can go to the next slide, these are just images. Wow. So we put all of Vic's, we put 1,000 of Vic's cars on the wall. And then there's one of Graham, we put Graham's stuff on the wall. We go to the next one. Yeah. So that seat reserve sign is what Graham had used to put on his own seat in his own cinema in his house, in his mom's house, when he was screening films. He would put seat reserved for himself. But I mean, as this is, I'm vaguely an academic, so I have kind of two vaguely academic sort of gestural points at the end of this, which are, if we go one slide over, and we kind of get a shot of all of the things on the left, which are kind of the question me and my collaborator Jack Wormel, the filmmaker, we were asking ourselves was, what exactly is the Cinema Museum a museum of, right? So it's called the Cinema Museum, but it's clearly doing something else. This is not just a museum of what it's like to go to see a film. There's clearly something else going on here. And Ronald and Martin are conscious of it, but nothing's said. It's a sort of collection space with such a strong subtext that you can just draw anything out, and it becomes valuable in the links between the objects rather than the objects themselves. And so the first thing that struck me, and this is the kind of abstracted, theoretical kind of field it might relate to, is that it represents what might be called the gaps of cinema, which is, obviously a rancière term, an area that also, in a kind of slightly off-kilter way, corresponds to Raymond Williams's structures of feeling, right? Which is, this is fundamentally a field defined by lived experience that operates between ways you can clearly record history and human experience. So it operates in that space. And it's kind of a field that is either under-researched by academics, I mean, lots of people make that claim, or it's a field that is perhaps too hazy to be approached by academics in the first place, or it's just not desirable to be approached at all, and maybe it's just me being around the cinema museum. But the kind of quote talking about Rancière that I forgot to footnote and therefore can't be credit to anyone, is the gaps, so this is the quote, the gaps of cinema are the results of cinema being other to itself, this internal heterogeneity producing extensions or relations with literature, politics and other art forms. Gaps and extensions make cinema overflow itself. These gaps are precisely what make it excessive in the sense of extending the questions and experiences it produces to other non-cinematic fields. And so my kind of point, the sort of academic point I'm making here is that the Cinema Museum in its kind of collections policy and in the way it kind of has no control over its space because it's constantly filling itself up. It's this kind of, you know, it's a cinema that never ends. There's collections stacked outside the front door. It's the materialization of these gaps. So in these kind of like, you know, stacks of cookbooks, stacks of VHS tapes, stacks of projectors that nobody needs, stacks of 16mm film projectors, that is the materialization. It's an iteration of these gaps. It's also a kind of fight against time. So first off, this is about preserving a kind of cinema history, but it's also a fight against the inevitability that a museum professional will succeed and inherit the collection. And that's fine, and Ron and Martin are okay with that. But it's kind of, they don't really want it to happen, but they know that's the only way it will go. You know, probably collections manager will come in who will chuck out half the stuff. But, you know, so it's a kind of resistance against that. Then the more coherent point, before I end, is it's a museum of everyday life, in essence, really. It's, for this exhibition in particular, it's kind of important to consider that submerged within each of these archives are the lives of the collectors themselves. So if you think of Grant Head at his mum's house with the sign, or you think of, you know, the poor demise of Peter Ewing, in the gaps of each collection sits the interests, routines, habits and expressive qualities of the creator, forming a unique kind of life writing, documenting the ordinary lives of many anonymous cinema enthusiasts. As such, the Cinema Museum's conscious acquisition of works from members of the public transforms it into a museum of mass observation, a lens where visitors can admire practices and works that would otherwise go unrecorded and unnoticed. So even visiting, we propose, is an act of mass observation. That's it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Yeah, as Kathy says, I and my partner Danielle have not that long ago taken on a once disused cinema in East London, very close here. I don't know if anyone's aware of the Castle Cinema or perhaps has even visited yet. We've been open for about 3 months. So I think what I was hoping to do today was just to give everyone a little bit of insight into how we've ended up where we are, and kind of what brought us there, and a little bit of history about the space itself and about our kind of process. And just, I think it's going to be quite light-hearted. I think it was fascinating hearing a little bit of Matthew's talks there. I think mine's going to be a little bit more light, a bunch of photographs and just a kind of just anecdotal really about our experience here of trying to open a cinema in East London. So yeah, hopefully it'll, you know, be of some interest to some of you at least. And I must admit, I did rush somewhat in putting these slides together, so there might be a little pause where I kind of have to catch up with which order they're in. But essentially, we're going to start with a little history about us, myself and my partner Danielle. So we started in 2012 with a project called Hot Tub Cinema, which, as the name suggests and as the image confirms, is essentially a whole load of hot tubs and a couple of screens, and we popped up around London and eventually around the world, doing this project full-time for about 4 years. So we started this project really just with the desire to do something that really kind of is a standout experience, something that perhaps people almost certainly won't have experienced, and hopefully gave them some really fun, memorable memories. So yeah, Project in 2012 we started, and that really gave us a taste for doing this kind of thing about presenting cinema in a really unusual format. We had a lot of fun with it, but eventually we reached a stage where we realised it was quite restrictive as a platform in terms of the cinema side of it. It was incredible as an experience, but you were pretty much limited to playing very well loved, very well known films. So things like Top Gun, Go Down a Treat, something, you know, like, I don't know, I'm Not a Negro, probably not the right saying for that. So, you know, it was great, you know, in its own right for what it was, but we eventually felt we needed to explore some other formats, and so the next slide is our next project, which was Pillow Cinema. So kind of continuing the idea of combining, you know, a novel setting and a novel seating arrangement with cinema. This was a step more towards a kind of broader palette of films that we were able to screen. So with Pillow Cinema, as you can see, it's giant beanbags, we again took this to a whole bunch of different spaces, indoor and out, particularly around London. But what was nice about this project was it did enable us to play quite a broad range of films. And it was during the process of trying to find venues for Pillow Cinema that we came across the Castle Cinema, as it is now. And at the time we'd had quite a number of years of frustrating experiences where we'd be having a brilliant time with the venue, and then with almost kind of certain predictability, it would then just get taken away from us and turned to, you know, housing, or, you know, knocked down and turned to a skyscraper. And it happened 3, 4, maybe 5 times in different places. And so we came across this space. I don't think the next slide is going to be what we want, but we can try it. Yeah, okay, fine. So yeah, basically we came across this space, and it immediately became apparent that this was somewhere that had an extraordinary potential, and not least because it was actually built as a cinema back in 1913. Off the back of that, I think the next thing we're going to see is a little bit so at this point we've kind of shifted focus towards the excitement of actually bringing something back to life, specifically, you know, a cinema as it once was. And in the process of kind of exploring this as an area of interest, we discovered that there was, I think, north of 50 different cinemas and theatres around Hackney. This was, I think, around the 20s, I would suggest, or certainly that kind of time. Someone might be able to correct me, but it was certainly during the kind of heyday, which, if I'm not mistaken, there was something in the ballpark of like 1.2 billion entries a year, admits a year to cinemas at that time. So there was a massive appetite, about 10 times what it is now, roughly speaking. Again, I'm kind of looking at Matthew, I don't know if he might be able to correct me, but something definitely in that kind of ballpark. A lot of people want to see a lot of films. So as you can see here on that previous slide, there was about 50 different cinemas in and around Hackney, and the Castle Cinema, the Castle Electric Theatre as it was one of those. So so we started exploring a bit of the history of this cinema in particular, and although we found some lovely pictures of Chatsworth Road, which is where we're situated, we didn't manage to find a single image of the Castle. We still haven't managed to find a single image of the Castle Cinema when it was originally opened. So I think these next couple of slides just illustrate, as I say, you know, the Chatsworth Road back in the turn of the century. Sadly, no luck in terms of finding any imagery. So at this point, we were towards the end of 2015, and we were now passionately looking to explore how we were going to create the Castle Cinema, or revive the Castle Cinema, should I say. And we landed on the idea of doing a crowd-funded project to try and bring it to life. And so we set about trying to find out as much as we could about the venue in readiness for sharing that with the community and the wider London cinema enthusiasts as a whole. So this was just me for my first go at the word has gone from my mind now. Microfiche. So my own little novel moment there in the Hackney archives. And we did find quite a lot of information about when the cinema was built. So this was a reference to the drainage plans. So the archivist was kind enough to kind of lead us in the right direction, and this has a reference. There we go, in the middle of the page for the Castle Cinema as it was being built back in 1912, and I think the following slide is in fact confirmation of the application. So the interesting thing about the drainage plans is that they are far more insightful than one might originally imagine. They, rather than just showing drainage, they actually typically show the cross sections of the space and so on and so forth. So from that we were able to get some insights into how the cinema looked when it was built. So this is looking down a plan view of the downstairs of the space, I believe, and then the following has cross sections. So you can see in homage to its name, the kind of crenellations at the top there for the castle, and you can see on this bottom side view the original balcony as it was, and then the stalls below. So I think when it was built, it was something in the region of 650 seats, so it was quite a large auditorium. So yeah, it was fascinating to get that kind of insight, and we kind of took that forward and really that kind of drove us more to, to really want to make this thing a reality. So that's pretty much what we set about doing. So in March of 2016, we started a Kickstarter campaign. I think the next slide might be reference to that. Oh, in fact, no, sorry, before we get there, a little bit more on the archives. I was having a great time with microfiche. So this was the Hackney and Kingston Gazette for the day, and I think the next slide is actually a zoomed-in shot of the announcement, the grand opening, complete with first-class orchestra. Sadly, we don't have space for one of those these days, but yeah, nonetheless, it was great to kind of get again a little bit of insight into the announcement at the time. And this is similarly an advert from another newspaper from when it was open. So just giving a hint of the artwork they used and so on. So I actually did a presentation for anyone that was interested in supporting us back in March of 2016, and this slide comes from that presentation. The reason I show this slide is, as you may be able to identify, this is actually where Mayor Street turns into the narrow way, so very close to here. I believe it's a betting shop that would be over here, and this is St John's Church, and this is where the overground runs now, so it's kind of extraordinary to see what it looked like during the Second World War. Obviously catastrophic, and the reason for this slide is that there was a remarkable anecdote from a gentleman that was working as part of the projectionist team at the Castle Cinema at this time, and essentially what would happen is that, of course, cinema being the main source of entertainment, there was a constant risk of air raids. However, people just weren't interested in having their experience interrupted. So this gentleman was working at the time as a rewind boy, so a kind of relatively junior position in the projection room. And part of his job would be to go and stand on the roof of the theatre, the cinema, and look out for V2s coming in and like listen for if they went quiet and they were looking to drop. And he would then have to shout down to the projection room, and they would like push a little lever or flash a buzzer and basically just show up in the auditorium to say essentially alert and a suggestion for everyone to leave the premises. But most of the time people would just boo and hiss and didn't want their cinema interrupted. So it's kind of mind-blowing to think, that was how determined people were to kind of carry on their entertainment for the night. But yeah, that just really stuck with me, that idea, and the fact this was happening in the space that we now run. So this is a few images of what the cinema looked like after it had closed. Like so many cinemas, it went from operating as such in the 1958. It eventually closed, and it was then turned into a bingo hall. Which this is actually the Hackney Empire, but again, I just thought it was such a lovely image of what one might have expected at that time. But yeah, so like a lot of cinemas, it turned into a bingo hall, and that ran for a couple of decades, I think, through to the 70s. It actually had a brief period where it was a storage facility. This was fancy goods storage, and it was also a shoe factory for a short while, and then eventually it became a snooker club, quite a well-known or arguably notorious snooker club, depending on what you think of that. But yeah, from the 70s onwards, it was run as a snooker club, and it was during the 90s that they actually separated the space between what was the stalls originally and the balcony area above. So from the 90s onwards, the space has now been subdivided as the ground floor and the first floor. And this photograph was taken by a chap that does a lot of great photography around Chatsworth Road, Jörn Tomter, and this was captured, I think, at the time that the snooker hall closed in the 2000s. So that brings us pretty much up to date. This was the closure of the snooker hall. They were kind of getting rid of all their various bits and pieces, and then it then was renovated in around about 2012, 2013 by our now landlords, and they have then opened Eat 17 as a convenience store, spa, branded convenience store downstairs, and for a short while they ran a restaurant in part of the upstairs space. And that pretty much takes us up to the present day. So this was a screenshot at the time from that same presentation a year ago, or just over a year ago. So at this point in time, we were nearing the end of our campaign, 3 days to go, and we'd hit 42 out of 45,000. And we were, dead keen to try and get over the line because it was an all or nothing project. So like all Kickstarter projects, you either reach your goal or you get none of the money. So there was a real pressure to hit that 45,000 goal. And I'm very pleased to say that we actually, in those final few days, and I think the next slide makes reference to this. In fact, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. If you jump back one, just a little insight of some of the things that we were doing for those people that supported us. We had the kind of things you might expect. We had admissions, memberships, and so on and so forth, all the way down to Lion Face, which basically was the opportunity for someone to be the MGM lion in front of all of our films. And extraordinarily, someone took us up on that. So that caught us off guard, and we actually haven't implemented it yet. We will be getting there, and there will be a lovely lady's face before every film doing that famous lion roar. So so that was eventually a fantastic success. As the next slide alludes to, we eventually reached 57,000 out of our 45,000 goal. With the help of 663 people from the local area. So that was an amazing journey. And that really heralded the start. I mean, this whole process for us has been one of just constant naivety of assuming that we're nearly there or that we are there. We've got to the end of this, like, yes, we've done it. And it's like, now we've actually got to do this thing. We're all very well thinking, let's make a cinema, but it's quite another thing to do it turns out. So we're now kind of switching more to our personal process that we went through this past year. So this is a shot of myself, my partner Dee, at Ardingly Antiques Fair. So this was like initially, we kind of reached our goal, and we rapidly realised we had a very kind of limited budget for putting together all of the fine details. We essentially raised the money predominantly for the projection hardware, which we recognised to be crucial to be able to run as a commercial cinema in this day and age. And then beyond that, we hadn't really kind of thought about anything else, so we kind of headed off to the antiques fairs and then wherever else to try and find things like chairs and everything else as cheaply as we could. And I'm going to have to be prompted by these slides. So this was, a few of these have been taken from Instagram. This was a photograph which we took when we got the keys. So this took us through to August. It took us about 6 months or thereabouts to actually go through the kind of legal side of things and get everything signed and sealed. But we eventually did. This is Dee doing a little bit of the kind of deconstruction prior to us installing the cinema. And this is me up in the roof trying to take down all of the original not air conditioning, but ventilation structure which was in the roof space, which we had to replace. This is probably the first glimpse. I realised I didn't put in a photograph early on of what the space looks like, but this is the first time we see, excuse the low res on this, but this is the first time you can see a little bit of what we're working with. And this is really what inspired us so instantly about this space, was the fact that it had these beautiful original features. It's got the proscenium arch across the top, and then the original ceiling from the cinema. So although the space has changed quite considerably, I feel like we've kind of captured a great deal of the essence of the original space itself. With those two kind of complementary aspects, it really does feel like you've got a strong sense of what that space was like in terms of the glamour and so on. This is us now moving on through installing the screen, so a much smaller space than it was originally compared to their 650 seats. Ours is 80 seats, but what we lack in size we make up for in comfort, so it's all lovely armchairs and a beautiful kind of space. And speaking of armchairs, these are the very same, so after trawling the antiques fairs and everything else we could possibly think of, we eventually landed on the idea of second-hand hotel furniture. One of the challenges with antiques, as some of you may be aware, is that they're not kind of fireproof and so on and so forth, and that presented a real issue for us in terms of achieving kind of a low cost and a high level of comfort whilst also retaining all the kind of relevant health and safety aspects. And eventually someone tipped us off on this idea of second-hand hotel furniture, and sure enough, we came across a company that cleared the Churchill in central London, so they had 900 of these beautiful armchairs, all full commercial fire safety and beautifully comfortable and the exact colour we wanted, so it really did feel extremely serendipitous. Eventually we reached December of 2016. And we were finally able to do our first test screenings. So these were predominantly just family and friends and a few Kickstarter supporters. But we were able to kind of prove the concept that we had actually made a cinema, at least in kind of practical terms. And I think what we came away from that was, so here we are, the happy crew. What we came away from that realising was that actually there was still a whole other stage of the story to go through, which was then actually turning it from a physical space that we created into a functional business. And that's really what we spent the last 3 months doing, or rather 2 months from January through February, was actually, kind of thinking about all the other aspects beyond kind of physically doing the install. But this is what we've got to show for it. So when all's said and done, we've got a couple of shots here. Again, excuse the kind of colours aren't great, but you get a sense of the space there. So we've got a beautiful, warm cinema space, and then we've got a kind of complimentary bar, which is kind of light and beautiful. And that's kind of, that's us really. So that kind of brings us up to the present. And I hope if nothing else, it's a little bit of an insight into our journey. As I say, for us, this has been very much one of just, of seeing that real exciting possibility of kind of recreating something of this kind of Hollywood glamour and kind of heyday of cinema. And I hope you guys agree we've managed to do something along those lines. But, thank you for your time.
So I don't know if there's any questions.
I can do a few questions.
When's it open? What times?
We're open every day. We're always open evenings, and we're always open all day on the weekends. And then we do have a limited number of matinee shows as well, which is a kind of part of the business which we're growing. So we do have, for example, a Parent and Baby on a Tuesday morning, and we are doing some kind of later afternoon matinees. But Monday to Sunday, evenings and weekends. Everywhere.
And what are you showing at the moment?
So right now we've just got things like Lady Macbeth has just come in, so that's I think it's the second or third week. Most of our films we tend to get a couple of weeks after the big chains have had them, so it makes things a little bit more flexible, and a big part of our emphasis is as a community cinema, and so we see that as being, we see our role in that sense as being one of kind of balancing access to films that people have heard about, and then also access to films from the kind of more independent art house, perhaps kind of foreign language documentary sector as well. So we try and kind of juggle those two. So at the moment we've got things like The Handmaiden, Lady Macbeth, Sense of an Ending right now. So we tend to have 3 or 4 different films a day where possible.
Do you program yourself?
We do, and that was actually something that there was a great deal of kind of people telling you can do it. I don't know what the right term for that is, but a lot of people said to us you can't do that, and we kind of thought we've done so many other things kind of naively and just kind of jumped in with both feet, and we kind of thought surely that isn't any different to any of the other things we've done, and sure enough it wasn't. And I think like anything, it's very much a question of trying to get the right contacts, and it was quite a struggle to do that, and I think it is quite a kind of closed group of people that you have to.
And you'll probably still have to continue like pushing people away because people will want to come and program you.
Yeah, that's right.
That does tell them to go away. Picture House in Curzon will turn up.
Exactly.
You have to say go away. And do you just do first runs, or do you do like rep stuff?
So we're trying to do more reps. So at the moment we're doing, I guess you would still call it first run. A few weeks off release, but essentially new films. And then we are looking to expand back into rep because. For us, that's really our background, with particularly Hot Tub, and then by extension, Pillow Cinema. We were relying almost exclusively on rep content. So that is definitely something which we are looking to kind of explore. But the challenge is very much a kind of frustratingly commercial one, and that is that you basically have to pay the same fees, at least the kind of same minimum fees for a single screening that you would for a whole week's worth of screenings, and so you're kind of disincentivized, and so we are in the process of trying to work out, how best to kind of establish a solid audience for those titles, and to make sure that we can kind of build it organically, because it's very much part of our road plan.
So it's just a comment to say what a fantastic job you've done.
Oh, thank you.
Honestly, I went a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, brilliant.
It was practically out of body. I sat in one of the chairs, they're very soft. There was a projector, and I think the projection is from the Cinema Museum, if I'm not
Oh, yes.
came to do the Annabella screen.
Oh yeah, that was a fantastic screen. Yeah, no, that's Umit, yeah, who runs the shop on. Yeah. So that was brilliant. And so for anyone that isn't aware of this, we did a 16mm presentation a couple of weeks ago with several of Annabella's short films, and that was just wonderful for us to see real film projected, and it sounded great, and it looked great, and it was I think it was a thrill. And I think it was a huge compliment that Umit himself was also saying, he was just really chuffed with how it went. So
he was narrating it as he went along.
Yeah.
It was just brilliant. And then he had a
He's
little rant
great.
at the end about the nature of projection.
He's brilliant. Yeah, for anyone that hasn't had the opportunity to meet Umit, he's well worth going on to. He does kind of regular film screenings around about the area, and I think Cine Real is the name of his kind of regular screenings. They're just brilliant, and Umit, as you say, is just such a brilliant character. So that was a real thrill for us, actually.
Do you have like a membership?
Yes, so membership's really been core to the whole process for us, certainly in the sense that it was where we started with the Kickstarter supporters. So the vast majority of Kickstarter supporters or chose the option of being members, and so that gave us a brilliant kind of groundswell support, and that's how we've carried on. So we've tried to design membership essentially to be kind of cost neutral. So it's £25, but it includes 2 free tickets. And if you actually come on the weekend, it works out as being cheaper to use those 2 free tickets. £25 membership for a year.
For a year?
For a year.
That's really good.
Yeah, so we've tried to kind of make it cost neutral. It's really about trying to establish that sense of kind of relationship with people that they then, they would then choose to come back. You get between 20 and 50% off your tickets, 10% off at the bar. So yeah, the idea is very much to kind of create that sense of community through that membership scheme.
Well, thank you so much, Ashley. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is not necessarily part of my PhD research, but I look at British psychedelic cinema in the long 1960s. So I look at films and liquid light shows. And one of the things that I realised from the beginning was that I was writing about a lot of films that were set in or had some relation to the West London area, which is also where I live. And as anyone who's obsessed with anything, whether they're doing a PhD or otherwise, will know is that you sort of live with things. You kind of, when you're writing about something or thinking about it, it just travels with you everywhere. So although psychogeography is getting a bit passé, what I want to try and do here is stage a kind of cinematic ghost tour of films of the 60s to late 70s and the kind of move through the streets of West London. Okay. In Graham Greene's short story, A Little Place Off the Edgware Road, the depressive Craven navigates the urban space in search of shelter and safety. Walking the streets of West London, trying to find respite from the rain, he comes across an old theatre, now home of the silent film. Purchasing a ticket, Craven enters the auditorium, where, in the dead darkness of the cinema space, he makes an unusual discovery. A backstory of murder and the Bayswater tragedy set amongst the illusory flickers of the cinematic reel. We'll start walking now and come back to it later. West London has a strong history of walkers who draw on the psychological depths of their derived to reflect on the lived environment and its impact on the psyche, the network, the community. Writers like Michael Moorcock, Tom Vague, J.G. Ballard and Jonathan Roban. Portobello's cinematic history, particularly during its heyday as a backdrop for gritty kitchen sink cinema, crime dramas and swinging London films, often feature men walking its streets in search of realisation, hunting for kicks or just down and out. The era's defining contemporary media image is, of course, Richard Curtis's romantic comedy, Notting Hill. In a 2-or-so-minute sequence, Will Thacker, played by Hugh Grant, walks along the Portobello market in a moment of retrospection. The market is in full swing, a sea of predominantly white faces, moneyed movie stars. Where has the neighbourhood got to? What came of its spaces, its temporary autonomous zones and radical networks? As regeneration continues to claw its way through the district, West London has, like so many areas, become prey to the continuing destruction of money and capital. The unwanted moved out, the desirables in. Repackaged as Portobello Village, the adverts speak volumes. Eat, buy, drink. In Soft City, Jonathan Raban would call the forces of regeneration the ghost pioneers, ousting the working classes from their close-knit network of terraced houses. Like vampires, they suck the blood out of the neighbourhood, leaving carcasses. Will Thacker's walk down the Portobello market conjures up a series of cinematic ghosts. In his introduction to Laura Oldfield Forbes' London zine, Savage Messiah, Mark Fisher describes these hauntological spectres as not so much ghosts from an actual past, but the traces of futures that never quite arrived, but that once seemed inevitable. Here they are, sputtering into life, briefly. It's 1964 and Beatles mop-top Ringo casts himself adrift before a major concert to go hide in a cafe in Richard Lester's A Hard Day's Night. He speaks to Paul's grandfather, who urges him to go out and live life through the streets. Ringo's Derive takes him, camera in hand, along the derelict and deserted streets of the West London borough. He saunters along Lancaster Road onto All Saints, stopping to take photographs of milk bottles. In the early 1970s, Raban would write about this area in his powerful book on urban life, Soft City. Calling for the continual creative play of urban living, Raban asks us to celebrate these moments at traffic lights, turning corners, when the city goes soft. It awaits the imprint of an identity. After being chased by young fans, Ringo slides into an antique shop and comes out in a long fancy dress overcoat, a disguise amid the new and confusing world of popular celebrity. With its famous junk shops and antique stores, Portobello Road becomes something of a signifier of all things swinging, and what Simon Reynolds would call the shift of retro, as the shift of retro comes into being. If Portobello's cinematic legacy in the post-war period offers us a document of post-war migration, of the impact of cheap rents, the exploitation of rundown housing by characters like slum landlord Peter Rackman, it also testifies to an embrace of fancy dress and exotica from the mid-60s onward, a hunting down of the authentic experience through recourse to exotic second-hand clothing. What fashion writer Nick Cohen describes as the 60s fancy dress boom was clearly in dialogue with broader social contexts, namely an interest in mind expansion through alternative lifestyle practices and the cultural impact of decolonisation onto a new generation of post-war youth. There are others. Fashion historian Alistair O'Neill points to 65 as a key moment in which the taste for innovation and futurism in fashion was replaced by a plundering and interpretation of historical styles. Hippie fashions appropriated Victoriana, Edwardiana or the 20s, and the exoticism of purportedly ancient or so-called primitive cultures into a mysterious bricolage of distinct references and ready-mades. This plundering of the past and the other implied a rejection of Western consumeristic values, even when this refusal is paradoxically expressed through consumeristic practices including shopping, travel and drug-taking. A prime example, Lord Kitchener's Valet, which started as a market stall on the Portobello Road selling military jackets, camp irony and a deep subversion of the legacy of empire. Another haunting, the solitary working-class grammar schoolboy Otley, played by Tom Courtenay, cuts a solitary figure along the Portobello Road in an extended opening tracking shot of Dick Clement's spy comedy. It's 1968, and we're walking through a London which film historian Robert Murphy notes has stopped swinging and settled down to become a shambling, easygoing, bohemian bathwater. Otley's world takes place among the dust and bric-a-brac of the market, among stallholders, bedsits and overdrawn rent, a place where objects like people go to die and be reborn. My friend, photographer Michael Woods, calls them the lost children of the Portobello Road. Artists, bohemians and liggers, they haunt street corners, drag out their coffees in the Portuguese cafes that line the Golden Road, pulled in, he says, by the powerful magnetism of architect Goldfinger's Trellick Tower. I've heard similar rumours before, like the fact that a powerful ley line snakes underneath the Portobello Gold Pub and out onto the market street, drawing out the neighbourhood's bad craziness like blood. In his chapter on the magical city, Raban describes Notting Hill as the unreasonable and irrational city, seeing evidence everywhere of a growing devout irrationalism. The messy prolixity of the place, he writes, makes it a perfect territory for the exercise of natural magic. Its unpredictability, its violent transitions from extreme wealth to extreme poverty, its atmosphere of being crowded out with disconnected loners, its physical characteristics as a maze of narrow streets and irregular crescents, combine to force the individual into a superstitious, speculative relationship with the environment. On the Portobello Road, he writes, one feels oneself growing more insubstantial, less and less able to keep a sense of personal proportion in the crowd of people who all look so much poorer, or richer, or wilder, or more conventional than oneself. It's 1967 and we're walking further down the market with Jane Austen's character and the Jack Bond film's Separation. This is swinging London all right, the music of Procol Harum and the rugged good looks of Ian Quarrier. But there's a darker edge. Jane walks the market anxiously, foghorns blaring on the soundtrack. We don't know what she's looking for. She finds temporary safety with a man, but the film shows us the schizophrenic experience underpinning swinging London's media myth, particularly for a woman. Growing gradually more insubstantial ourselves, we take a turn onto Palace Gardens and take a left onto Palace Square, slipping seamlessly into a scene from one of the area's most famous films. Nicholas Roeg and Donald Cammell's performance signals a shift in the filmic imaginary of the area, a moment when the crime and hippie underworlds fuse together. The film makes itself a geographical shift around 30 minutes in, from Wandsworth to West London. East End gangster Chaz's Western transition is signalled in... Oh, I'm on ahead, sorry. Is signalled in the film by the first of a number of stylistic changes, using a combination of brill cream and red paint, the same paint used to graffiti Joey's flat. Chaz paints himself into a new persona by taking on another's identity. Unwittingly, he douses himself in the colours of what my friends and neighbours call Notting Hill red, the deep beaver-like magenta of Bohemian flats in the area. These are the colours, of course, of Turner and Mick Jagger's elaborate Orientalist flat in the ubiquitous Palace Square. Doublings run through the film like veins. The posters hail Red or Dead, vice versa, Turner and Chaz, performer as singer and performer as gangster. Gender, sexual and racial identities are, like the film's production design, intensely malleable and in a state of permanent instability. Chaz's arrival to West London also signals a shift in the film towards a kind of interior. I need a bohemian atmosphere, he bellows, an echo of the voices of regeneration. I'm an artist, Mr. Turner, like yourself. For the London counterculture of the mid to late 60s, West London, and specifically the predominantly black neighbourhoods around Notting Hill, was a locus point for countercultural and community-based activity. The area had a strong West Indian presence, partly due to the post-war government's drive to rehouse immigrant communities in the neighbourhood. Cheap rents and the easy availability of drugs also made it attractive to young people. As Jonathan Green observes, white Bohemia was intimately tied to the black community. The influence of black culture on London life is a powerful, if little examined, undercurrent in performance. As Colin McCabe notes in a film about the impact of black culture on London, it's noticeable that performance only features one minor black character. That character is Noel, a hippie musician heading to Liverpool. Though Noel plays a minor role, he is key in locating the film's investigation of cultural appropriation within the black sounds of contemporary rock music. Moya Luckett notes how his image suggests an alternative strong masculinity for a new multiracial Britain, a nod also to the legendary guitarist Jimi Hendrix, living in the Notting Hill area when the film was made. Hendrix died there too in 1970. The whereabouts of his various drinking establishments are still the stuff of rumour. Ladbroke Grove writer Michael Moorcock would revive Hendrix's ghost as a vampiric phantasm in his short story, A Dead Singer. Hendrix's ghost is seen through the eyes of a wasted roadie. By the late 1960s, these were firmly established zones of unruliness, spaces where, as Raban muses, one could not deduce the existence of God from the Portobello Road, but one might register from it the force of the amoral, the relative, the anarchistic. As areas of the establishment began to clamp down on countercultural behaviour, most prominently with the trial against local underground newspaper Oz magazine, Notting Hill had a fairly bad reputation. In stepped a young head, the budding filmmaker Joe Gannon. As a teenager, Gannon had established himself as the first official lighting designer for Pink Floyd, taking them from early experiments with colour film, flashing diachroic floodlights, to the sorts of layered and complex liquid wet show techniques that the Floyd became rightly famed for. For Gannon, a key moment in defining this transition arrived in the form of a visit by two American light show artists, Joel and Tony Brown, whose liquid wet slide demonstration at the Notting Hill Church of All Saints in October 1966 signalled to many the arrival of new forms of experimentation with light and sound. We'll stop there now, the building is still there. I tracked down Joe Gannon via a network of suggestion, chance encounters and the space flight of Facebook to ask him about the area. He tells me, By the time I met the Pink Floyd, I was a working lad, you know. I actually did jobs for money. I was living in a bedsitter in Notting Hill at the time, one of those places with a gas ring on the floor, where the landlady bangs on the door for the rent every month. The bedsitter, the furious landlady, we've met her before, in Otley, threatening him with eviction after sleeping with him to make up the rent, or in West 11, furious at the presence of lascivious beatniks. In 1970, Gannon would make a film about Notting Hill, designed to illustrate the radical potential of the underground at the time and redress negative perceptions of the area. The voiceover would describe a cultural and racial melting pot, probably the world's most integrated ghetto. We meet Caroline Kuhn, then working at Release, that offered legal aid for young people having run-ins with drugs and the law, and the temporary autonomous zones of the Mangrove, with its call to members of the Viet Grove. Here is the legacy of these zones of resistance: the London Free School, Oz Magazine, Friends, the birth of the Notting Hill Carnival, squats, raids, the origins of vegetarian culture. In 1975, with pressure, Horace Ove would make the first feature film by a black British filmmaker on the streets of Ladbroke Grove. The communities which photographers like Charlie Phillips had documented and writer Colin McInnes had fetishised brought to life on the screen. Tony and his friends moved freely around the urban space, finding in the streets a responsiveness to their sense of alienation. The soft city yields briefly. We're coming to the end of our walk, and like Craven, we'll stop at a cinema. This one's the Electric, one of London's oldest cinemas. The Electric has endured a number of facelifts, its current incarnation involving a violent skin graft combining an elite members club with an overpriced diner. Cinema as afterthought. Like Craven, will sit in one of its seats. Enveloped in the dead darkness, images fly by quickly. We reach out to the cinema seat in front of us. John Christie of Rillington Place, the mass murderer of Ladbroke Grove, immortalised in Richard Fleischer's 1971 film, emerges before us. Local rumours persist that Christie worked briefly at the Electric Cinema. Like the snack bars of Ladbroke Grove, where he found his victims, the cinema might have been a useful place to meet strangers in darkness.
After the reverie of letting yourself escape into a film and giving yourself to another world and another place, all good things must come to an end. Battling on through somebody else's narrative and a collective vision, while safe in the womb like space of a cinema, dark, velvety and safe. We have to then pull ourselves out. This is a Caesarean pull into reality and its brutal daylight. Even worse and even more transformative if you went in during the daylight and back out for the night. But us cinephiles are friendly vampires who drop into the dark when we need to. The slides that I'll play are a collection of my own collection of typographic punctuations to films. A collection sent to the voice of Ruby Murray, a nod to us here. Sit back and enjoy these moments until we're not in canvas anymore. That's the actual end. Yeah, so Kathy very kindly sent me the last films that were shown in the Ghost Cinema. And
South Hackney Picture Palace.
And they were a kind of starting point for me. And often I find myself that the best bit about the film is the end, where you have that feeling of almost bliss but also despair because it's over. So I started collecting the ends from that, and this just came at a really nice point of thinking the end of the cinema but also the end of the film. And I'm a big fan of typography, so even just having my own collection of those has been quite a joy.
And how did you come to be showing it on this particular projector?
Yeah, I've always been into lo-fi, and think today's been really nice because we've heard about so many different elements of harking back to the origins of cinema. And I found this in just a little antique fair, or not even an antique fair, it's probably a flea market more like. And it was a really beautiful piece with a tape deck, and I've never seen anything like it. And just having it on in my studio and having it as a thing felt quite performative.
So the music was playing on the
in the projector.
It's curiously moving, I found.
Yeah. Well, also because this is the very last event we're having here as well.
Very, very poignant.
So that's all good. Are there any questions for Matthew, Sophia, and Heidi?
I've got a question for Sophia. Sophia, there's a few of us here I know, West Londoners, and specifically some of us who actually work on the Portobello or close to the Portobello Road. And that was just wonderful, absolutely, really informative and everything. But I need to know, what's the name of the film with Caroline Coon in it, and what's the name of the film that Horace Ove made?
Yeah, so the film with Caroline Coon is called Getting It Straight in Notting Hill Gate, which was a documentary by Joe Gannon, made in 1970, and it's really interesting. It is free to watch on the BFI player, and it's kind of presented as a curio. For my research, it's just invaluable because you get a lot of actual interviews, face-to-face interviews with people who were key to the scene, and certainly in the latter part when arguably it became more politicised. And you can really see Gannon, even though he was like 18 when he made, was he? No, he might have been 20, but you know, I mean, like a kid.
Wow.
Really trying to present the underground in a more positive light. So it's a really interesting film, and it's named after, I don't know if you know the prog rock group Quintessence. Well, they have a song called Getting It Straight in Notting Hill Gate, which has the lyrics, "We all sit around and meditate," which we do, actually.
I know Caroline from back in the day. And the Horace Ove film?
And the Horace Ove film was Pressure, and that was 1975. And it is, I did not even try to do it justice, I just said a line. It's the most amazing film, and the most painful at the end. That's all I would say.
Just a quick comment for Sophia. First, thanks, I love the talk. I just recently rewatched this, is why I mentioned it, but a film that might work really well in this project is a BBC monitor from that Ken Russell made, A House in Bayswater. That's also on iPlayer right now, and it's about a house in Bayswater off the Portobello Road, and why it kind of curiously contrasts is that it's a film almost entirely made in the private space of an old Victorian house, and there's like a line in it that frames it like off the busy kind of main road is this place, and it's an artist's home. Ken Russell used to live there, but the photographer David Hearn is there, and so it's this odd portrait, but it resonates very well actually with the films that you talked about. So I feel like it's a very rich topic, and you know, but yeah, geographically I feel like that area hasn't been as well served as some other London areas. Absolutely. So yeah, thanks.
What's the name of that film?
It's called A House in Bayswater. It's a Ken Russell monitor film, so it's like short. It's like 20 something. It sounds like the documentary you were just talking about, where what would have been regarded as a weird curio is actually kind of like weirdly like a really important, interesting movie.
Is it full of little weird characters who all live in this?
Yeah, everybody, it's of vastly different ages. The landlady, of course, is a real character, but they all have different like jobs. There's several artists, and they all have like kind of strange personal habits, which is also kind of fun. You get to invade their working spaces and things.
What's the name?
It's a house in Bayswater.
House in
Yeah,
Bayswater.
yeah.
I have to
But yeah,
I'm
everyone.
gonna watch that.
Yeah.
It is really worth a look.
I wanted to ask Matthew, are you planning to do any more with those strange archives from the Cinema Museum, like the card? And when the exhibition was at Birkbeck, I went a couple of times to see it, and I was never sure whether I was allowed to look at stuff.
Yeah.
And I kind of did a couple of times, but I was like looking around, pulling open the drawers and looking through.
We weren't. Wow.
Weren't officially allowed.
Were you allowed to touch the stuff? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I started the exhibition, me and Jack weren't really sure when we did it. I guess that ambiguity is symbolic of the entire ambiguity of the museum. Yes, it was fine because like there was no value, and actually people really enjoyed it. You were allowed to do it. What do we plan to do more of? Well, that particular exhibition should travel maybe to America, maybe to France. That's what we're planning to do. But really, what the Cinema Museum doesn't do is kind of narrow down and contextualize its own collections. It just constantly expands, and then it hosts it has a great program of events. But yeah, so what we're going to focus on is kind of plucking out certain genres, themes, kind of happenings within the collections, and then try and get them out there a little bit more. But yeah, that should travel though.
Could I ask? Oh, sorry, let me go.
Do you know whether there are similar, people were doing similar things in other countries, or is there something about that sort of cataloguing and that seemed to be particular to you?
It's particular to cinema going, it's not particular to, cataloguing is it's an inherently Western thing. It's in academia it's part of modernity. It's the 19th century desire to put everything into taxonomies, and it's a method of control, but this is a kind of method of personal autobiographical control. And yeah, there's evidence of happening everywhere. I'm in dialogue with a sort of archive researcher in the States who says in the MoMA archives he's currently researching film diaries of a cinephile kept at MoMA. I can't remember, he must have been an artist who detailed every single film he went to with reviews, every single detail, all credits of every film he saw from the 1970 to 2000. So these things exist everywhere. Also, as part of the exhibition we screened Cinemania, and there's another way of tracing these people is looking at major cinematheques and rep theatres in kind of European and North American cities, and every one of these cinematheques or rep theatres. So I work at the BFI as well as the Barbican, and we have the regulars, we have the members. They're the members. The Lincoln Centre has the regulars, the BFI has the members, and they're groups of there's a sort of